Shirt show. All right, let's go.
Shirt show! Talking shirt! Shirt show! Talking shirt! Shirt show! Talking shirt! Shirt show! Shirt, man! All right! Episode 81 of Shirt Show! We're talking with Kevin from Chromaline in Minnesota. Let's go! Shirt show!
Hey there, cutie patootie.
Hey, brother.
Hey.
Check.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I really like your hoodie, and your hat's really cool.
I like what's underneath that hoodie. Oh, yeah.
I almost went to nipple. Did you see that? Like,
I
it
saw
got
a nipple.
pretty high up.
I saw a nipple.
No, you didn't.
Yeah,
You did.
Andy. There's an Andy nip slope out there.
That's my third nipple.
Even if you have three, it's still real.
Is it?
Sure. I don't know.
Well, actually, you've seen my nipples before. Remember that day we had a long time ago with our good buddy Justin?
Mm-hmm.
That motherfucker made us take off our shirts.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun, right? It was Wild Boy. That was our initiation into the Wild Boys, which I don't think we were formally ever initiated into.
That's why we're mild boys.
That's why we're Wild Boys.
We had to make our own club.
We did. We got kicked out. Like, we almost made it. Like, we came close. I shot the fucking gun and everything, right?
Hey, right.
But just didn't work out. Sometimes it doesn't, you know? I think that's a good life lesson. If you like don't get into the club.
Make your own club.
Make your own club.
Yeah, fuck them.
Yeah. Even if it's by yourself.
Yeah.
Hey, what have you been doing the last 18 hours since we talked last?
Seriously.
So much to talk about. I hope you had an action-packed night, because otherwise we're just gonna like sit here. We're not gonna have anything to say.
No, we got stuff to talk about. So last night I left here and then I went to Bill's house and hung out with Bill and Brian, and we watched the fights. And my pick from last week's episode lost.
Last week's episode.
I say last week's episode, but it was the episode we recorded yesterday. He lost. He got robbed.
You didn't bet money, right?
No, we didn't bet any money, but it was just funny. And then there was, I don't know, all the fights were pretty good. So hung out there till like 1:30, went home, went to sleep, slept in this morning. And then I went and grabbed breakfast, and I'm here with you again.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with all of that, except for 1:30 is definitely past your bedtime. And I don't know, you're in trouble.
Look at me. I look so rejuvenated and well rested.
You do look good.
These aren't bags at all.
You do look fresh. Maybe that's some sort of caffeine induced freshness, though.
It's just my face.
Oh,
it's just puffy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But other than that, I mean, technically this episode comes out right at Christmas time?
Dude, I don't know anymore. I don't
either.
Know. So it's coming out in a bit.
It's sometime around Christmas.
It'll be bipped when it comes out, though.
It'll be so fucking bipped.
Like, it's gonna bip hard.
This one will come out on the 27th, so after Christmas.
You sure about that?
Yeah, I'm looking at the calendar right now.
Well, hey, let me tell you this much. This is going to be a Christmas present to me and to you, and hopefully to all that are listening, because
all the
Kevin,
good little boys and girls.
Yeah, he's going to lay down the law. Like, he has some things to say.
Okay, good.
I don't want to talk about him right away. I know we're talking about our thing. Sorry.
Right.
I got ahead of myself.
Right. I agree with you, though. I think that having him on now is a good time, because it's going to get people ready for that, New Year's resolution of updating their darkroom.
Yeah. I'm going to be better.
Right.
I'm going to be a better human,
right,
and a better screen printer, and gosh darn it, even a better friend.
Oh, really? About time.
I was saying that to you as like, maybe you were saying that to me.
I'm going to be a better friend. I'm your best motherfucking friend. I'll be there for you.
You're up there.
Yeah, I'm at the peak. I'm at the fucking summit, asshole.
You are way, way, way up there. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I don't want to say like, I don't want to make it so that you're like, oh, I'm his like best friend. I don't have to do anything. I can sit back and cruise control this shit because I still think you need to work. I still think
King of the Hill. It's King of the Hill. I got to stay up there. I got to fight all these fucking assholes off of here.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. It's easier to climb the mountain than it is to stay on top.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just made that up. But
I plan on staying.
Okay. All right, cool.
All good.
Hey, so can you describe to me, you remember
it's red
taco or no, it's too early in the morning it's
early.
Not in the, it's fucking too early. So don't go there. I was trying to tell you something. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Can you just be quiet for a second? I have a question for you. Let me finish the question and then you can answer. Then you can answer with all the words you want. Ready? Here we go.
All words?
How would you describe bar taco, or as some people refer to it as dope ass tacos, or the real name bar taco? How would you describe it in one word? Because I know the word. And I
know the word. As soon as you said one word, I knew exactly.
Okay, one word.
Spicy.
Spicy.
Everything we had was super fucking spicy. JoJo's soup.
I mean, okay,
thing?
time out. Yeah,
Spicy.
Okay, true. So I need to clarify this question just a little bit better. So the vibe of bar taco. How would you describe the vibe? One word. Still say spicy.
Spicy.
No, like one word.
I was sticking with
looking
spicy.
for fuck. Okay, because
all right. One word to describe the vibe there?
How would Brett describe it? His word.
Oh, would Brett describe it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm looking for. It starts with an H.
It starts with an H.
I.
Hipster?
Yes.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yes.
I was just trying to find a word that wasn't so
offensive,
hipster or offensive. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree with you because it's sort of a hipster taco joint, and there's nothing wrong with that. No. Because the food was good, and we said that already. Here's why I ask: is because last night
I was wondering where you're going with this.
Yeah, we went out to a taco joint in St. Louis we had never been to before, and it's called Uncle Julio's.
Was it in the back of a van?
It was actually like a dude, Uncle Julio. Yeah,
right. That's what I mean. He was like, "Hey, come on, man, I got some tacos for you."
It is. I wish it was in the back of a van, because here's the word I used to describe this taco joint. Not hipster, bougie. And so, because why? You looked at me like, well, I don't get it. Well, here's the thing. It was like fancy. It was too like fancy.
You can't have fancy tacos.
No, you can. And we did. And it was
tacos need to be like sloppy and dirty and fucking low down.
These were clean and
were they tiny? They were tiny too, weren't they? Weren't they a little tiny little fucking ultra tiny corn tortillas?
We didn't have tacos actually. We had fajitas. We shared. You know how when you do the fajitas for two, when you really don't need fajitas for two, you just need them for one because it's already too much, and they bring out. But you can't do that, and so they do the fajitas for two.
Does it look like I order anything to share, Andy?
No.
There you go.
Maybe not. But when you're with your loved one, or maybe your best friend like me, like if we went out and got fajitas, we could share. And I think it would be fun. Bullshit. Bull fucking shit. If I said, Dilly, can we just get one? I think you would have done whatever you could to make me happy. That's what a friendship, like a real friend.
Right. I would have got a whole meal, and then I would have got one to share with you.
Okay. But here's the thing. It was bougie because it was really fancy on the inside, like $1 million build, like decor. I'm not saying it was bad. Like the food was good.
Are we Yelp now?
Pretty good. Yeah. We're doing taco reviews. I think actually, you know how Portnoy and Barstool, they have the pizza review thing. Maybe
we're just going to do restaurant reviews.
Taco reviews.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Wherever we go, we get tacos and
I'm down with that. I love tacos. Tacos are delicious.
Me too. And like I said, this place was good, but it just wasn't the vibe. Last night, it just killed. Like we were We were ready.
So you want a hipster vibe, not a bougie vibe.
I'm not saying that. Although if I had to choose between the two, I would definitely do bar taco. It was just better. The next place we need to go needs to be a spicy vibe, like you said. I like that. We need to find a spicy taco
like a burlesque restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
We need a burlesque taco restaurant.
Yeah. So yeah.
Spicy.
That's all I can say. I don't know. It was okay.
Okay.
You know, it's
just a good date night.
Yeah, that's all. You know, and I guess the thing is we, you know what, Joanne, I'm going to be a little romantic here. So if this makes you like sick or barf, just earmuffs.
You're a romantic guy.
But we sat in a booth across from one another. And if you know,
that's what normal humans do.
Nope.
Are you that fucking asshole that sits next to the person?
And like this in a booth, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, hell no.
Oh, okay.
So I said hell no. But we usually just like go to the bar, you know, like we'll go up to the bar and then sit next to one another and
right. Well, you would at the bar. Yeah.
Yeah. That's your option. Right. And that's fun. That's like cozy and kind of lovey-dovey and, you know what I'm talking about?
You get to sit on the bar stool and your feet are swinging.
I know that I was described as petite by that guy. I can't remember his name. Is it Marcotte or something like that? Mm-hmm. And he described me as petite, but I don't think I'm petite. So like when I sit in a bar stool, my feet hit the thing.
Mine don't.
The railing.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, because you are petite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They have very short legs.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Like you're mostly
I'm all torso.
Torso? That's what we call it.
I have a 30 inch inseam.
Holy shit. You buy jeans 30? Because I buy 32.
I get 30s.
Are they flooding? Are like floods on you? Or do they come to the
I just get straights. They come to the top of my shoe.
Oh, well, you can do like on Brady Bunch and hang from a monkey bar.
Stretched out?
Yeah, you just stretch it out.
Okay.
Christmas themed dad joke. If you do not have.
I have two.
Christmas themed.
Christmas.
Or holiday themed. It doesn't have to be Christmas. Just holiday. Okay. Well, you have two, then you.
Do we get like Hanukkah ones? Because can't do all Santa.
Yeah, no. If you want, go for it. I support that.
We'll do multiple. It's Christmas. Presents. I got two, you do two.
Okay. Why don't we eat clowns at Hanukkah?
I don't know.
Because they taste funny. That's so fucking bad.
I actually like that
one. Okay. This one's pretty good. I got one more Hanukkah one, and then I have a Santa one. Okay.
Okay. All right.
And then you come with yours.
Mm-hmm.
So, how can you recognize a Hanukkah hippie?
I don't know.
He's the one with his hair in dreidel locks.
It's so stupid. There's no effort put in that one at all.
All right. And then I got a Santa one. Ready?
Okay.
So why does Santa have 3 gardens? And I thought of you when I read this punchline.
3 gardens?
3 gardens. Why does Santa have 3 gardens?
I don't know.
So he can ho, ho, ho.
Hilarious.
Okay. So that's all I got. You're up.
What do you call a kid who doesn't believe in Santa?
I had a couple answers, but I didn't want to offend anybody. So go ahead.
A rebel without a clause.
Oh, I read that one earlier. Yeah, I should have known that.
What does a snowman eat for breakfast?
Not yellow snow.
Frosted Flakes.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, of course.
Oh.
Okay.
And we're wholesome. Yeah.
Right.
I kind of want to I've been thinking about this for a while. I kind of want to have a segment where we do the dad jokes, but then the last one, I want to have my actual dad give me a dirty joke.
Or just tell it. Like have him on to tell it.
Just call my dad every Sunday and be on the phone and be like, Dad, tell us a dirty joke.
Yeah, just bring him in for just a quick.
I agree. I think
quick
that would
dirty
be
joke.
good.
I'm okay
Yeah.
with that.
They're going to
I'm
be
okay with
fucking filthy though.
That's okay. And that'll be our 2022 like new segment. You know
We'll
what I
bring
mean?
that in. Mhm.
Yeah. Freshen it up a little bit. So yeah, I think it's time, and you better get ready right now. Like prime it up, because this shit I ain't playing. Frank. Now,
And I got a beautiful text message from Frank.
are you talking about the cash one?
Yes.
Why is that beautiful?
Because he agrees with me. Remember in the episode we were talking about how I carry cash?
Oh, I do.
Right. And we got a text from Frank that said cash is king.
I don't think he meant that, you should carry cash. I think he was referring to your buying equipment, not financing equipment for the most part. Yep.
He was saying Dylan's right, Andy's wrong. That's all he said.
Well, that's okay. Two wrongs don't make a right.
Sure.
In other words, I'll spell it out for you. You and Frank being wrong doesn't make it right.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Mhm.
I got 2 presents from Frank.
Mm.
2 more presents. I got the cookies, and then he gave me this. And you know what this is?
Anal lube.
Yeah, you want me to demo it for you? Here's how it works.
Mhm.
So, you want to just read the directions or show you?
Read them.
No, this is actually
I want to picture it.
I wash, I flush. And do you know why you got me this?
For the champagne.
For the champagne. And so actually, you're supposed to have this. I don't know if it's what amount of employees that you should have where you need an eye flush
I
station.
kind of just want to buy a super soaker and just fucking blast them in the eyes if they need it.
Well, the point of this is it's filled with saline solution. Like
I could put saline in a super soaker.
Okay, yeah, you do that, Dylan. I think you should. I really do. That's great.
Like,
advice
your
to
eyes
give.
are burning. There was a chemical that splashed in your eyes. Let me fucking super soaker you in the face.
Okay, so for those of you who are listening and don't want to get sued, or also want to really help your team, and when they get something in their eye, check this out. So you have this, you break the seal, and squirt it in your eyes.
That's what she said.
Eye flush, and he gave me 4 of them, like a lot of them.
Wow, Frank.
I know it looked like 2, but I have 2 more over there. And then the next present, here is part of it. It's a stick.
And the tape shows how far to shove it up your ass.
Yeah, and this is how far.
That's just the handle.
But maybe I would go, and this would be up by you. So here is the other part of it.
Oh, fresh plunger.
Right there, guy. Look at that.
Nice.
And so, do you know what I did? Which, by the way, I need to mention. I sent our friend Brian over to Impact in Kentucky. I sent him a plunger
Did you
with
really?
a note. Yeah, I don't think he's got it yet because the delivery date's next week, and it said, I can't remember what I said. Something like,
hey, sorry,
man,
I shit in your toilet and clogged it.
Yeah. Say, I'm pretty
and broke
sure.
your plunger.
I didn't say the part about the toilet. I just said, hey, man, I'm pretty sure I broke your plunger. So, here's another.
How do you say pretty sure? You're positive you broke his plunger.
I don't know that I did. I told it in the story where I said, I think it was broken, like already. You just don't plunge 1, 2 and breaks. Like it was broken. I was set up. And so I'm pretty sure I broke it, or maybe I didn't. Either way, here's a new one. You know what I mean? Like here's a new one.
Right.
Whether I broke it or not.
You should have let it be, man.
No, that's not how. I couldn't sleep. with it. It was bothering me because I think that if somebody came here and did that, and I'd be like,
it's funny because when I went to Chicago, I said something to Tom. I was like, hey, did you hear the full story about Andy in Kentucky?
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. And then I told him the whole thing and he was like, oh my God. He's like, you talked about that on the show? And I was like, yeah.
I am off the M&R team. That's it. You just fucked it up for me. Thanks, dude. I was already on the outs and now you just secured it. Or what would you say? Now you, whatever.
I sealed your fate.
Sealed it. Yeah. You sealed the deal.
Oh God. It's such a great story.
I don't know if you're my number one friends. I don't think you're on top. I think that you should have said I think you should have not said that story.
No, I said the story, and then when I was done,
Tom.
I said, "Just kidding." I made that whole thing up.
Oh, okay. All right, you're back on top.
Okay, cool.
But dude, like it all starts with a screen, and whether it's new stretches or restretches, Frank and his team do it the best.
Definitely true.
To find out more, you want to go to graphicscreenfashion.com, FFFFF.
Rank.com.
Like I did.
You did that. Yeah, you did it really fast.
Wow. I'm starting like after 80 times or something, it starts to sink in. And then also
greatfuckingscreens.com.
Greatfuckingscreens.com. Mm-hmm. So check Frank and his screens and his emulsion and a bunch of other shit. Like check them out.
That should be part of your New Year's resolution as well, especially with talking to Kevin today, is dial in your darkroom, dial in your screens, your pre-press, everything. So for sure, make it part of your to-do list is to hit up Frank and get some samples.
That's right.
And test your fucking screens, people.
And this is what we're going to talk about today too, because there's tools. There are tools that you need that people skip over. And then you scratch your head thinking, why isn't this white printing? Or why can't I get this detail or whatever it is? And a lot of times it just takes a tool. You got to have a tension meter. You got to have a thickness gauge. You got to have a exposure calculator, other stuff, these kind of things. But, everybody loves cleaning screens.
False.
Yeah, a lot of people do, but not everybody. Do. Yeah, some people do.
Psychopaths and murderers.
And me.
Yeah, exactly. Point taken.
But EasyWay makes it easier. Their line of eco-friendly chemicals will help you get your screens and your shop clean.
Truth.
Check them out at easyway.com. EasyWay. Mm-hmm.
It's the easiest way. By far.
Shit is.
Sure as shit is.
Action Engineering, well, they make accessories printers need.
Mm-hmm.
They have all kinds of rad stuff on their website, actionengineering.com. And if you find something that you need, be sure to put Shirt Show in the checkout and you're going to get 15% off.
Mm-hmm. And also too, keep checking back or follow them on Instagram or get on their email list. Cause I'm constantly seeing stuff that Eric's making that's new and they're finding new ways to do things with old style palettes. I saw one the other day where they now make M&R palettes that have notches in them so you can load them faster. Because with the palettes now, you kind of look for the end and then you slide it on. Now they have it where there's a notch so you can just drop it on and then pull it where it's got to go, like a faster load palette. So it's just stuff like that. They're always thinking of ways to improve current tools. So you should check them out.
Dylan, that was elegantly said.
I know. Everything I say is elegant.
Yeah.
I piss excellence and elegance.
Monarch makes ink. And they make an ink that is an everyday white. It's called Stark. And guess what? You get to use it in your mixing system, which we also these days have been using every day. In fact, on Monday, we have a 9-color job. One of the colors is white and the 8 other colors are Pantone matches. We have to make 8 fucking colors.
Welcome to the jungle.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I like the jungle. I am down with mixing 1 color for a job or 2, but 8.
I feel like I'm Robin Williams in Jumanji. That's how in the jungle I am.
I do not know that movie. So
Jumanji?
I don't. Okay, I don't know that movie.
Dude. Okay. Well.
Oh,
now you got something to do for the rest of the day.
I watched a great movie last night on Netflix. It's number 1 in America. By the time this one comes out, I don't know if it's going to be. If I can only remember the name of it.
So good. I don't know what it's called.
Hold on. I need to take more vitamins. Fuck. So this is, the movie is, it's with Sandra Bullock. Or do you say Sandra?
Oh, I saw that one.
What was it called? That's what I thought. fuck yeah, fuck you.
I
too.
didn't say it was the best fucking movie I've ever
You
seen in
didn't-
my entire
yeah,
life.
but you, I didn't say that, but you need to take some vitamins too. Yeah. So what was it
like
called?
Destruction or something like that? What was it called?
Come on, making fun of me, and you can't remember it either.
I watched it. I don't know.
Well, I watched it.
It was really
Doesn't
good though.
mean
It had a sweet twist at the end.
It did. Yeah, I was like, I even said out loud, like when that happened, I'm like, oh, it's the fucking blah blah blah, and Joanne's like, just like that.
Yeah, it was the blah blah blah.
Sandra. Sandra. Yeah. Okay. Here it goes. Ready? Is it really called Unforgivable? Watch. What time? The Unforgivable. Does that sound right?
Sure.
I don't know.
Well, it was good though. It was really good.
It was really good. I don't know. Like,
Mhm.
good job, whoever made that. It had me.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
cried. Joanne cried. We both cried at the very end. We cried. Like human,
I can
like
see it.
joyful, like
You were going to
emotional
say
tears.
human tears?
Mhm.
You're a lizard people, aren't you?
Next we have it's just Monarch.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
that
So
confirms it.
learn more at monarchcolor.com.
This
Ink
is-
better.
All of that was part of Monarch.
Yeah, it has to do, it's kind of correlates. It ties into it.
Okay.
Ink better, print better, be better,
Liv Moss,
Monarch.
Monarch.
We got to get going. So let me tell you about today's guest. His name is Kevin Kauth, I want to say. Kauth. Some might know him as the Emulsion Guru, and you can find him on Instagram. He is with Chromaline, who is headquartered in Duluth, Minnesota. And he came to our shop once upon a time with tools. Huh?
Minnesota.
Yeah. That's a good accent. You nailed it. You're talented.
Thanks.
He was in our screen room. He was here a whole day and he said, here's what you're doing right, which was most. Don't say, just be quiet for a minute. And he also said some of the things we were doing wrong, which wasn't very much. Be quiet. Don't say anything. And that's really helpful when somebody does that because, you think, you don't have a lot of time. Well, for one thing, like he is the guru. He's the expert. That's all he does is like the screen room. And so that's what he studies and that's what he lives.
You talked to me all about him and his visit and hyped him up so hard. And then I called him and I was like, hey man,
and he
I gotta
didn't
have
call
this.
you back.
I gotta have this Andy treatment. Like I gotta have you at my place. And he was like, yeah, you're not in my territory. I'm not coming to your fucking place.
Yeah, he actually is, but he just.
Yeah. He was like, fuck that guy.
Fuck.
So let's have him on.
I'm sure he would use do a Zoom call. Like, maybe he can't fly out to New York or whatever.
He actually just sent me a picture of his middle finger. That was it. That was the only response I got.
Now that you mentioned that, I've got another ornament in our ornament series. Ready? Drum roll. And I'm saving the best for fucking last, bro. I bought 2 of these. One for me, one for you, so we can share ornaments on our tree. We'll have the same ornament.
Mm-hmm.
This one is getting mailed to you tomorrow. This tops them all. You ready?
Okay. Perfect.
It's a gnome. For those of you that cannot see and that are listening to this podcast, and it's a gnome given.
He's holding up his 3rd digit.
Yeah. How great is that?
Mm-hmm.
So I got one for you.
Thanks,
Okay.
buddy.
That's what friends are for.
Mm-hmm.
So without further ado,
Kevin Featherline. I hope he's got like emulsion all over the place. It's like smeared on his face like war paint.
He's got
Christmas and Chromaline.
I just showed Dylan my I think what is the best Christmas ornament I have, and I want to share it with you also, and then maybe you can share with us one of your favorites back there. You ready for this?
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Is that a fresh Dixon you got on there?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I can spot it from a mile away.
Yeah, it's always good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I had to look good for you guys today.
Well, I mean, I appreciate it. We look our best too, obviously.
Obviously, always.
Right. So what's going on, man? How's your Sunday?
Sunday's going good. Not too much going on.
We
Uneventful.
finally got you on.
I know we've been talking about it for what, over a year now?
Been a while.
I hope
You're a busy
that,
guy.
well, and plus he's like a Packers fan. They didn't mean to say that. I hope I didn't fuck up. Is it Vikings
No.
or Packers?
Definitely Packers.
Okay. I see it on the back wall there, but you're in Minnesota. What's up with that?
So I'm originally from Wisconsin. I'm born and raised in Wisconsin and then moved over to Minnesota after graduating. So I've lived here since 2005, but the rest of my life was all in Wisconsin. Yeah, of course.
You guys can talk sports ball and I'll sit here and act like I know what I'm talking about.
I don't know a whole lot about, like, I used to know way more. I used to have football cards and trade them and stuff like that, but I don't know currently what's going on. And I did for a little bit when St. Louis had the Rams. We've had a few teams. We had, of course, the Cardinals, and they left us. And then we had the Rams, and they left us. And they sued. They just settled. You know how much money they settled for?
I can't remember. I saw it, but it was an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah, like almost $1 billion, like $780 million, because we built this massive stadium, and then they left, and so they broke the deal.
That's because who wants to be in St. Louis?
You got a point. Yeah.
I think they should have paid them to get out the fuck out of here.
And how many teams does New York have? Geez, like 1,000?
Mm-hmm.
In LA. LA's got 1,001.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Quite a few.
Yeah. So what do you guys want to talk about today? Do you want to talk about dye sublimation or
I was thinking we could talk about grilled
stickers?
cheese sandwiches.
Grilled cheese? I love grilled cheese.
Yeah, grilled cheese. Let's talk about grilled cheese. Well, the funny thing is like we were going to have you on, and I mean, there's a ton of stuff that we can learn and figure out about darkroom, but I don't really know exactly where to start other than, I guess your story or the Chromaline story,
Sure.
or like how emulsion has got from where it started to where it is now, kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I could talk a little bit about my background first of all, and then we can kind of go from there.
Okay.
So I started screen printing back in high school. I was printing T-shirts for bands of my friends, and that's kind of the similar story of a lot of people I've heard. From high school, I ended up going to the University of Wisconsin Stout, and I got my 4-year degree in 5 years for graphic communications management. So it's kind of all forms of printing. It's screen printing, it's flexo, gravure, offset, all that good stuff. And to finish my degree there, I had to have an internship. So I did my internship with CFAR, who's the mesh manufacturer. So you probably have heard of those guys before. They're a Swiss-based mesh manufacturer, and they had a technical and marketing center here in Minneapolis. So I did my internship with them, went back and finished my last semester, and they hired me on full-time. So I first started my career in our industry, working for CFAR as their application specialist in the technical side of things there. And I worked for them for about 6 or 7 years.
What does that mean? What do you do there? Okay.
So if there's people that have complaints about mesh, if mesh is breaking, if they think that they're not getting the right ink coverage or anything like that, they're going to have complaints. Those complaints come in. We can do all kinds of different break tests, stretching tests, elongation tests, print tests, all that kind of stuff, just to prove the point that it's not necessarily the mesh, but more of the application process.
Mm-hmm.
And it really goes back to basically everything technical from that side. And really, when I worked there, I learned all about the pre-press side of screen printing. So that falls right into what I'm doing now. With emulsion as well. So we would do exposure testing for customers, and I would go out with the sales guys and do, kind of the technical background work with our sales staff. And then they actually ended up moving out to Buffalo, New York. I did not want to move to Buffalo, New York.
Why not?
Yeah.
No offense, Dylan. No offense, but
I mean, I get it. It's cold and depressing.
Well, I'm in Minneapolis, so I know all about cold and depressing. But yeah, so I hung out here. I mean, this is where my family and friends are and everything like that. So I was sticking around here. And then this job at Chromaline opened up, and I've been with them for almost 13 years now.
Dang, that's awesome.
All from the pre-press side of things and all from the technical side of things, always from the manufacturer. I've never been working for a shop like you guys, but I also learned all from the manufacturing end, so I never picked up a lot of the bad habits that people have.
Mm-hmm. No, but it's cool to do. It's cool to have that background, because that's what I feel like a lot of our side is lacking. Is we learn how to print, we learn how to make it work, and then once we figure out how to make it work, we kind of stick with it, and we don't go back to the technical side of it unless you're a nerd and you want to deep dive into like how to make things better from that kind of level. So I feel like there's a lot of printers that are just like, yeah, I coded my screen and it prints ink, so I'm good to go. And then there's a lot of people that are also now trying to like get the best of everything and deep dive into those things. So it's cool to have someone like you that's like grew up in that area of just like the technical side of it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that a lot of shops, including our shop, used to think, or still do, that problems on press or why doesn't my white ink print? I mean, sometimes a lot of those problems come right back to screen coding techniques or emulsion types or exposure, the way you're exposing it or developing it. It all comes back a lot of times to just the emulsion, which is crazy to think.
Yeah, absolutely. Typically, when there's a problem in the entire process, it's at least one or two steps before that problem is taking place. The cause is from one or two steps before. So it's not typically an on-press issue. It's most likely a screen issue, or the screen issue is, it's not coating. It's probably degreasing or reclaiming. It's usually the step before that's causing the problem where you're at there.
So you've been with Chromaline. What are you doing at Chromaline, I guess, and what have you been doing there the whole time?
Yeah, so I've been with Chromaline for almost 13 years. I am the technical sales rep for the Midwest, or at least it started out as the Midwest. My territory has continued to grow ever since I've gotten this position, and now I pretty much cover everything from where Andy's at all the way out to the West Coast and everything in between. So I get around and I see a lot of different shops, and I see how things are done differently in all different places. It doesn't necessarily mean I know everything in this industry, but I've seen it done in so many different ways that I can kind of pick and choose what methods and techniques from all different areas and see which ones kind of work the best.
Right. What are you noticing the most of? Like, what are the common mistakes and the common things that you're like, way too many people are doing it this way and they need to be educated on that that's not the way to do it?
Yeah, I think honestly, Andy and I were actually talking about this the other day. I think one of the biggest things that printers fall into kind of a pitfall is they go out on Facebook and they say, hey, what's the best emulsion to use? Well, just because one emulsion is perfect for one shot doesn't necessarily mean it's perfect for another shot. There's different exposure units, different environments, everything that goes along with that factors into really what you should be using. And when people go on Facebook and say, what emulsion should I be using? And they get 20 different answers. And then they basically just start looking to see, this one was recommended the most. I'm going to try that. Mm-hmm. And then they might have problems with it because they're using it wrong or have the wrong setup for that particular product. I think that's one of the biggest problems.
I 100% agree. And I think that for those who don't know, Chromaline, if you go to their website, they have videos made by you and other people, and it breaks a lot of this stuff down. So if you have a question of like, what's the best emulsion, or what emulsion should I be using? Just like you said, it's specific to that shop because it depends on, well, what's the humidity there, for example? Do you need an emulsion that's really resistant to humidity? Are you using water-based? Are you using plastisol? Because those are different choices. Or do you have a metal halide, or do you have LED? Or, what light source are you using? Because you want to pick an emulsion that has an appetite for that particular light source. And so if you don't have a video or don't get your information from that video, I'm sure there's a rep or somebody like you that they can call and ask those, tell them what we have at our shop, for example, and then get recommended the best emulsion for that shop. So those answers are out there. And I don't think, just like you said, it's not the best way to do almost anything. Like whether it's, hey, what's the best white ink to use? Those kind of questions, it's not by popularity. It's by what's the best product to use for your shop.
Well, the problem is that on these Facebook groups, everybody, it's not just Facebook, it's all over the place, but everybody just tries to find the shortcut. They're like, I want to skip all the testing. Just tell me what the fucking best emulsion is. Yeah. And it's like, that's not how it works, dude. Like, you need to do the testing. Like with people with white ink and like all this other stuff. They're like, what's the best of this? What's the best of this? And it's like even how we talk about like Monarch and all this other stuff. It's like, dude, I didn't just get Monarch and I was like, well, this is what I'm going to do. It's like, I literally tested it a shitload before I got it. And I was like, this is the ink I want in my shop. And it's the same with emulsion. Like we've gone through probably 30 emulsions since we've been here to figure out like what one works the best in our humidity and everything else. And then, like I said, we found one that worked really, really well. And then we went to CTS and then it changed completely because we threw in a different variable. Like it's not the same. We can't say we love this emulsion and then immediately we get a new tool and then our whole world was upside down again because we threw in something that had a drastic difference with the emulsion we were using.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's case in point to what, you were saying before, as far as if somebody tells you this is what product you should use. Well, if they have a CTS and you're using inkjet film, how can they recommend that particular product without having all the same variables that you do as well?
Right. And I feel like that's just the common theme in all of these episodes that we talk about. In this industry, there's just too many variables. There's too many things that people do differently to nail down, like, this is the specific best ink, best emulsion, best screens, best everything. It's like, dude, just like do your fucking homework. Like you need to figure it out. You need to do nights and weekends or whatever to like dial in your own stuff.
Yeah. And I've learned a ton from Kevin. And like one of the things, another factor I think that people consider when buying emulsion, every shop should, is cost. But what's really interesting, for example, is in one of your videos, you talk about solids content. And so if emulsion has 50% solids content, that means it's 50% water. And so when you coat your screens, 50% is going to go away and evaporate. And so, yeah, maybe you can find an emulsion that's cheaper, but maybe it's 25% solids and 75% water because that's cheaper to make. And then it goes away and then you're left with less emulsion. And so just little things like that are tips. Can you talk about like solids content and why that's important?
Sure. Yeah, you basically explained it right there, but you're right. There's so many people that will just switch products because they save $1 or $2 per bucket, but they don't think about what the actual screen cost is per screen. And you're right. The solid content really goes back to that. If it's high solids, which is around that 50% mark, which is almost as high as you can really put in the solids to that product and really be able to coat it properly. But yeah, there's some emulsions that are low 20s. So if you're looking at low 20s, that means you're almost 80% of that product is water. And you're right, water's cheap. So if you're trying to compare apples to apples, that's not a fair assessment. Mm-hmm. And when you coat, say you coat your screen 1-in-1 with a 50% solids emulsion, and you coat your screen 1-in-1 with something that's like 25% solids, when you go to actually measure that EOM, the thickness of your stencil afterwards, you're going to see a vast difference between those two. If you coat it the exact same way, probably about, half of the stencil is going to be there compared to the higher solids emulsion. So, really you would have to coat that screen maybe 2-in-2, 2-in-3 to equal a 1-in-1 coat with a higher solids emulsion.
Yeah, and can you talk about why that's a problem if all of a sudden your EOM is too little? Like what can happen if it's both ways. It can, if you have too little of an EOM, it's bad, and if you have too high of an EOM, it's also bad. And can you talk about why that would be?
Yeah, absolutely. It really goes back to almost the same type of effect on the print, but if it's too thin of a stencil, you're going to have issues where the threads are going to interfere with your artwork, and you're going to kind of get that stair step pattern. Sawtoothing is what everybody typically calls it, but I've heard it called about 100 different things. But that sawtoothing, if you have too thin of a stencil, your edges aren't going to be crisp and clean. They're going to be jagged, and it's just going to kind of follow the threads instead of having a nice, clean arc to your print. Or
you're not building
line.
that dam.
Exactly. And so that emulsion, that about 10% of your overall stencil thickness should be your EOM. So your emulsion should be about 10% thicker than that overall stencil thickness. If you go too high, unless you're using something like a fat film and you're doing high density prints, those inks are designed to do high density prints. If you're not using that type of ink and you have too thick of a stencil, most of the times you have issues clearing the screen, and the ink gets hung up in the screen and you don't get a nice cleared print, a nice clean print, just because you have too thick of a stencil. So if you find that happy medium right in between and find that perfect target point, which, somebody like myself can come in and do measurements, or, you can go out there and get thickness gauges as well. Most people don't have them. That's why I recommend reaching out to somebody like myself, or even one of my competitors. They all have the same kind of tools that I have, and they can come in and work with you as well. It just matters who you're working with. Whoever your sales rep that you're working with, invite them into your shop, have them work with you, and they can kind of dial in that process for you.
What do you recommend for somebody? Like, I know it's easiest to get somebody in like you or whatever to help you dial that in, but is there a way for an average printer to like get a roundabout good EOM without using a meter or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one of the things that I'll look for when I go into a shop, actually, I've got a screen here. If I go into a shop, I'll actually feel that stencil. On the shirt side of the print side, if you feel that stencil and you can feel the edges, it's telling me there's a gasket there. If you feel that, all you feel is just smooth, just like the mesh. There's no difference between where the mesh is and the emulsion. It's not creating that gasket between the two. So one easy way is just get handsy with your screens. If you feel your screens, feel the stencil, and you can feel it. It's telling me that there's something there, and that's step one. Most times it's too thin. It's not too thick. So don't really worry about the too thick side of things, at least from the textile side. If you're doing graphics printing, you're printing on glass, too thick of a stencil is more important than somebody in the textile world. Like, we're printing on t-shirts. Chances are too thick of a stencil isn't probably going to give you that same type of issue as too thin of a stencil would.
Right. The problem I feel like with a lot of places is that I guess so many people have different types of dark rooms or wherever they're coating screens or whatever they're doing. One thing I've talked about doing, and we're now doing, is trying to get a mini fridge in the dark room to have our emulsion constantly at the same temperature. So that year round, because here in New York, it fluctuates so much. Like in the wintertime, it's like super cold. Even though the room's heated, it's still like the concrete's cold or, whatever. And then in the summer, it's really hot and humid. So is there a best practice with that, with emulsion, to kind of keep it the same? Because in the winter, if it's colder, the emulsion, I feel like, is going to be thicker. Then when you coat the screen, that's going to affect your EOM or how much you're laying down. In the summer, it's going to be warmer and more, like the viscosity is going to be less, and it's going to coat thinner.
Right. Yeah, you're right. But there's pros and cons to doing that as well. If you put it into a mini fridge and it's at refrigerator temperature, and you pull that out into a warmer environment, there can be issues with condensation, as well as when it's in the fridge, it's cold. So you're right, it's going to be thicker. So when you coat your screens, you really want to have that emulsion get back up to room temperature before you use it. You can leave it in a fridge, and it's gonna create a little bit longevity as far as
I'm wondering
shelf life.
I'm wondering if in the fridge, like, you don't leave it at the regular like refrigerator setting. Like if you were to just put it at, like, say you found a temperature, you're like, okay, I want this to be at a constant of like 60 degrees or something. Like if you set that just so it was constant year round. Is there a good temperature emulsion should be at for like optimal use? because I know you don't want it to be too high or too low.
Right. Yeah. I mean, really, I would try to create the environment instead of having your like a little fridge that you keep it in. I would try to keep the screen room environment at a constant temperature with, if you're using air conditioners in the summer and heaters in the winter, try to keep that just like you would keep your house at a constant temperature. That's going to be best case scenario, just because you want it to be about 60 to 80 degrees in that environment that you're using the emulsion. If it dips below that, you're fine, but you don't want it to get too cold, because then it's going to change the viscosity of that product as well.
Right.
Which can actually play into exposure times and everything else goes along with that.
Right. And that's what I was trying to fight, is just, I wanted to keep everything in there to the same standards, I guess. Like, I wanted to say the room is temperature controlled for the most part, but like I said, I feel like there's certain differences in the summer and winter when we're kind of fighting two different battles. So I just wanted something to be like, okay, this is a constant. Like our emulsion, we find out what the best EOM is. I want to make sure our emulsion is always the same. I don't want it to be thinner and thicker and thinner and thicker.
I think that's really tough. And I think that we approached it as the whole screen room, because we wanted it to, we pull it out of the fridge, let's say, and then you coat your screen, and then 24 hours later, the humidity takes on the humidity of the room. And so just because you had low humidity in the fridge, now all of a sudden, of course, this, and all of a sudden the humidity's, jumped up. So we have a humidity gauge in our room so that we're monitoring and keeping track of the humidity in the room. And so we treat it as like the whole thing as a refrigerator, basically.
Right. And I get that. I'm just
also, and I figured you did, but maybe you're talking for people who don't have the luxury of a screen room, because we didn't used to. We had a closet, and we couldn't control anything.
Right.
But as we scaled, we knew that we had to take control. We needed a screen room before we needed a third auto. You know what I mean? So we went after, like we got to get, we have to learn and get way better in our screen room if we're going to ever churn out over 100 screens a day type of thing. So as we scaled, we knew we had to learn a lot about our screen room. And one of the things you just said, we noticed, because we have an actual thickness gauge here and we can measure screen to screen. We were coating screens with a Unicoat, which is supposed to give you consistent coating, right? You should be the same all the time. But what we learned is that's not even true, because just little things, little variables like how much emulsion is in your scoop coater can change the thickness of your emulsion. So if you start out with a full scoop coat, and then by your 20th screen or whatever, your scoop coat is empty, and you're going to get a different EOM. And so we learned that quickly that, wait a second, we want to always keep it. We don't want to let it get down to the bottom. Yeah, right. Exactly. So little tiny things can change and mess with your consistency, because you're on press and you're like, why is this screen different than that? We have a machine that coats our screen. That just doesn't make sense. And so we chased it around, figuring that out.
Well, that's why I was saying about the mini fridges. I'm just trying to keep all the variables as consistent as possible in that room, so that, we have consistent results all the time. Like, yeah, the room is, I guess, somewhat temperature controlled. Like, my problem is that in the wintertime, I have to have heat on and keep the heat in there consistent. And then I either have to add humidity or take away humidity, depending on, because here in the winter, it's really dry. So I have to add humidity to keep everything at like 50, 55 for the eye image. And then in the summertime, it's the opposite. I have a dehumidifier on all summer long, and I don't have an air conditioner in there, which, I mean, it doesn't really ever get too hot in that room because it's insulated and it's its own room. But still, it's like, it's just one of those things, like the sciencey part of it is keeping those variables the same. That's why I was wondering about the fridge. And I don't want it to sound like I'm keeping it as like a regular refrigerator. I just wanted its own cabinet of, it's set at this temperature and it's very, very insulated. And this is what my emulsion coats best at 62 degrees or some bullshit.
Sure.
And then it's just consistent.
The problem is with that, as soon as you take it out of that box, now it's in a different environment as well. So it's going to keep fluctuating as well. Yeah. So really, like Andy was saying, if you can keep that environment of the screen room consistent, as consistent as possible, at least, it doesn't need to be, it's 70 degrees and it never fluctuates, because we put things into the emulsion to help with that fluctuation. We put certain things in there that help, that it gives a little bit of forgiveness. And that's why maybe one particular product would be better for your shop if it fluctuates more than others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's certain emulsions like photopolymer emulsions, which just aren't very forgiving. You know, people want to have that one part emulsion. They don't want to mix it and everything that goes along with it. However, you need to have your exposure times dialed in right on target. You need to have everything dialed in right on, because it's just not very forgiving. If you have something that's just a little bit more forgiving because of all the other variables that are thrown into it, then maybe there's a different product that would be better for that particular shop.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Oh, I have a question that I don't know if you can answer. And me and Andy have talked about this many times, because I feel like a constant on this show is talking about like screen prep and like computer to screen and all that stuff. Does Chromaline or any other manufacturer in emulsion ever think to like specifically work with the manufacturer of a CTS and be like, let's figure out the best possible emulsion options for customers who buy this machine in different parts of the country? Because like for us, that was the biggest headache. And I know Andy had the same problem, is like when you get the machine, they don't tell you what emulsion works best with the black ink that comes out of the machine. Like what will adhere best, what will not spider out, what humidity. Like if you're in New York, like this emulsion on this machine is your best bet, or the closest we can find.
Yeah, I think really it comes down to that. We work with all of the direct-to-screen manufacturers, and we want to have kind of a handful of products that work for that machine.
Right.
You know, so say like the iMage, that's using inkjet technology, we want to have something with the surface tension that the ink doesn't go on and it doesn't spread so much.
Right.
Whereas there's certain products out there that the surfactants start to leach out. It kind of changes the surface tension of that emulsion a little bit, and the ink kind of starts to tend to spread. And that goes back to the environment as well. If it's really humid in that environment, if it's really dry in that environment, that all plays into it too. So, I mean, going back to when you get that machine, so if anybody gets any of the direct-to-screen systems that are out there, have that conversation with your emulsion rep and see which one they would recommend. Because chances are all of us have worked with pretty much every one of the systems that are out there, and all have products that'll work for each one of those products.
So I guess that's the answer, because usually the manufacturer doesn't know. Like the manufacturer of that CTS doesn't necessarily know what emulsion is going to work best for you. So the answer should be, if you're buying a CTS, the very next step you should do is call your rep for whatever emulsion you're using and say, hey, I'm buying this machine. In your opinion, in my area, what is the best emulsion for me to use? Because I didn't think of that at the time, and I don't know if a lot of people did, but like that was a headache. You know, like you're like, okay, I bought this machine, it should work, and you immediately try your emulsion that you've been using forever, and then you find out, oh shit, this isn't working.
I mean, because
Right.
your emulsion works. I mean, we went through the same thing. We went through 300 screens before we figured out how to make our inkjet do exactly what you said.
Right.
Sit
Yeah,
on
me too.
that.
We went through like
adhere to
9 different emulsions until we found the one that worked.
Dude, it was so hard. But here's why I think, and we talked about this before, and I think this is why there isn't a real solution, is because the manufacturer, if they choose an emulsion company, well, then that's a relationship, or that's a recommendation that they just all of a sudden maybe they can't make, because if they were to say, oh, well, Chromaline's the one, well, maybe the person who sold that piece of equipment doesn't carry Chromaline. They carry a different emulsion. And so you just upset somebody. And so I think that sometimes,
like Kevin said, I think the very next step should just be known that if you buy that piece of equipment, you should just call your rep and be like, what works best? I mean, that makes the most sense.
Right.
I think you're right. And I think that if they, like when we bought that machine and installed it, if they would have just said, hey guys, because you said this a minute ago, surfactants. Like I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what the word was, what it meant, why there would be surfactants put in my emulsion in the first place, and why it would work great for one reason, why it's there, and terrible for the other reason. Do you want to go into that, or can you talk on that a little bit? Why that's a problem?
There's different things that get put in emulsions, different surfactants. There's different leveling agents. And that kind of stuff, when you say you're hand coating a screen and you don't hand coat it perfectly, some of those surfactants and leveling agents, when the screen is drying horizontally, gravity is pulling that down, and those leveling agents will kind of level it out so you have an even coating across. So you don't, it kind of goes back to, once again, taking out those variables. If most people don't have auto coaters, but if you can reduce those variables by, changing the chemistry of the emulsion, by how that emulsion sits in there and how long it takes to dry and everything that goes into that, it helps kind of mask some of those issues that people have with hand coating their screens, different pressures, speeds, all that good stuff. So a lot of that just kind of goes back to, just reducing those variables once again.
And that's what I've been trying to do as much as possible with the darkroom, is just get rid of human error and variables. Because I feel like once you can somewhat control that, then you kind of have some consistency.
Right.
I guess I kind of want to step back. We talked about, EOM, but like, let's go back to the screen. Like, in your opinion, what are the ideal screen conditions, and what are some issues people are seeing with like fish eyes or whatever when it comes to taking a screen in the darkroom, coating it, and then they run into issues?
Sure. Yeah. I just want to touch on one more thing before we jump into that.
Yeah.
We're talking about the direct to screen systems and the manufacturers of those systems. Most times when they install that machine, you're just using the emulsion that you've always used, right? So you bring the screens, you put them in there, and the first thing, say it doesn't work. The first thing that manufacturer of that DTS looks at that and says, well, you just have to change your emulsion. Sometimes that's not what it is. Sometimes it's how you're coating the emulsion or the environment that it's being used in, whether it's too humid or too hot or too cold, too dry, any of those environmental factors. Instead of just changing, putting an air conditioner in that dark room, they just say, you should just try a different emulsion. And then they just start this cycle of just trying new things, throwing products at it instead of worrying about what the real problem is. And the real problem is the process and the environment, not necessarily the product in some situations, at least.
Yeah, we did have that. Like, we had our emulsion and it didn't work, and we had like spidering issues and all this other stuff. And then we did more research on it and talked to some people and found out that it was the humidity in our room that was giving us those issues. So what we did is we ended up going out and buying like a whole house humidifier that I had in that room, and I had to put like 5 to 10 gallons of water in it every day to keep that room where it needed to be. So after a while, that sucked. Like, it sucked because I didn't have water in that room, and I had to like wheel the thing out to the hose, fill it up in the morning. And then what do you do on weekends? You know what I mean? To keep your screen room where it's got to be. It's like, do I got to come in on Saturday and Sunday and fill the fucking humidifier and everything else? And it got to be this thing where it was just a huge pain in the ass to make that emulsion work with those variables of like keeping everything perfect when it came to humidity and temperature and everything else. So then we ended up being like, well, there's got to be a better way. So that's when we started trying more emulsions. And then we finally dialed in an emulsion that was like perfect for us. I feel like it had everything we wanted. And we put diazo in all of our emulsions too, because we like the dot it keeps for us with plastisol. Sure. And we like the fact that we do a ton of water-based too. So it works great for us, but it had such a fluctuation where it was forgiving on both ends. Like, the humidity doesn't have to be perfect. We haven't had any issues with the eye image on that emulsion since it's been working. So we're like, oh my God, we finally found one. But like I said, it took like 8 or 9 emulsions to get there. And that's the thing though, too, is like, you don't necessarily always have the time either. It's like, you get a new emulsion, you're like, okay, let's code 100 screens and let's just go keep working. Like, we have to get screens out.
Right.
And then you find out like, oh, half of these screens are trash. And then you try a new emulsion, you code a bunch of more screens, and then you try things. It's like that whole trial period is just like a nightmare.
And that's why I say have your emulsion rep involved in that conversation.
And which is funny because it's like, when you said that, I was like, that is the easiest, like, dumbest response. That like, why would I not thought of just like, hey, call somebody and be like, hey, what's the best emulsion for this machine in my area?
Yeah.
And it's like, It's just like, I was like, no, I'd rather go the hard way and like try a shitload of stuff and find out for myself that they already knew one that probably worked out well.
Or you can reach out on Facebook. People have all kinds of opinions on there, and you'll have 20 different emulsions that you can try tomorrow if you just say, what's the best emulsion for me to use with this direct to screen system, and everybody's got it figured out.
Yeah, I try to avoid Facebook as much as humanly possible. All right. So I guess back to my question with the screens, if you can dive into that.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we're looking at, screens, fisheyes, EOM, like I said before, it's typically not the process in your screen room that's causing whatever coating issue that you're having. Most likely it's not from coating your screens the wrong way, but from the step before. So if you're not degreasing your screens, or the chemicals that you're using, say they have a degreaser in them along with emulsion remover, and basically it's one chemical that does everything, those typically don't tend to work as well as kind of like that 3-step process, in my opinion. But if degreasing your screens, if you don't get all of the chemicals off that screen, those are an oil-based product. And if that solvent that's left on that mesh is going to repel the water-based product, which is emulsion. So if you coat your screen and there's oil or solvents or even oils from your hands or, touching your screens, that's going to repel that emulsion, and you're not going to have good adhesion to the mesh because of that screen just not being cleaned well enough. The other thing that I see people do, not as frequent, but people use household detergents like Ajax and Simple Green and all this kind of stuff to degrease their screens. Those are great for the process that they're designed to clean. However, they're not designed to a clean mesh. And when you're rinsing the screen off, if you don't get all of that detergent or degreaser off of the mesh, now that is also going to be a contaminant on the mesh as well. So it's kind of that double-edged sword. You want to clean the screen, but you want to get all that degreaser off the screen as well.
For those who don't know, the cascading effect is what I always try to tell people, like when I'm training them at the finishing station, is it's one thing to blast it with a pressure washer or a power washer, and it's another thing to actually spray the water on the screen so that it cascades down and like completely covers the mesh and then washes it as good as possible. Because like you said, not only does it pose problems or cause problems in the screen room, but it can mess with your screen life. Like if that chemical gets into your frame, into the glue, it can eat away at the glue, and then all of a sudden you'll see your mesh come up, because there's that chemical still in there. So cascading.
Yeah, absolutely. People using pressure washers to degrease their screens. Most of the time, that pressure washer, the water's shooting through and it's kicking up all the stuff from that's inside of your washout booth back onto your mesh. So it's not really getting clean. It looks clean, but it's kicking all that, all the degreaser, all the chemicals that's down in the water back onto the mesh. You're right. If you do that final rinse with just a garden hose, just go slow right across the top, let it cascade down over the screen, you're going to get more of those degreasers and everything else that's being blasted around inside of there off, because they're putting more water on that screen.
And that's why we had, for the longest time, we had 2 booths. We had a clean booth and a dirty booth. So we had a dirty booth where it was just for like hand cleaning screens. And then we had a clean booth that was just for blowing screens out, or like, like a degreasing or something. So if you did have blowback or whatever, you weren't getting just a ton of shit from the booth onto the screen. I'm going to ask you a tip from my own shop that we've kind of had to deal with is, I guess we have town water. So like the water has stuff in it, and I don't know what it is, minerals or whatever shit they're putting in the water to, make it drinkable. We're ending up with the screens drying. Like we'll finish them off, put them in the rack, and depending on what way we're putting them, we're trying to put them more vertically so that they won't drip through each other.
Yeah. Are you when you dry them, are they horizontal or vertical?
We're doing them vertical now because we were having so many issues before. But like if we were to put them in horizontal, they would end up dripping on each other, and then we would end up with fish eyes because the drips would come through and then dry, and then we would have, like mineral
kind of
deposit.
pools.
Right.
Yeah, and then dry.
Right, where it dries off.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the water that you're using in your area factors into it. If there's certain areas all over the country that there's more minerals in the water and hard water and all that kind of stuff. And if you're working in an area like that, what I would almost recommend, instead of how you dry the screen, what's more important is getting that water out of that screen faster. Mm-hmm. So you can use like a shop vac with I know AW2 has a great, it's designed for screen printing. Yeah. This nozzle that goes on there, and you just, basically shop vac, suck that water right out of the mesh. Then when you put it in there, you're not going to have to worry about that hard water calcifying on the mesh or, dripping down onto the screens below it, because you've already sucked all that water out of the mesh. And that's a better process than also people use like an air nozzle and blow out their screens. But sometimes there gets oil in the lines that you blast on your screens. I know it's not an issue all the time, but it's just something else to think about, that there could be things blowing onto the mesh if you're using like an air
That's
nozzle.
true. I never thought about that, but that does make sense, because there definitely is like an oil in your air. Yeah, I mean, that was our biggest thing, and that was one of the selling points on the Blue Water system that we got for our auto reclaim, is that he has the air knives at the end. So when the screen comes through and it comes out the other end, it's like most of the way dry. It's not, there's no drips on it. It's just not like dry, but it's not going to drip on the next screen. So that was giving us a lot more peace of mind of, we take it out, we put it in the rack, it's pretty much dry, and we can go to Kauth later on. So
can I have that?
Yes, you can have that. Yeah.
Because that, that would be amazing. That's a huge issue, because
that was for us, because, we eliminated with the CTS and no glass. We were like, oh, fuck yeah. We rarely have pinholes anymore.
Right.
Because you don't have to deal with those variables, but then you get on the other side of it, and now you're having variables with the water leaving fish eyes, which might break down and then give you, screen breakdowns or a pinhole or something. And pinholes are just sneaky bastards. Then they're always in the worst fucking spot. They're never like right where you can see. They're always like on the edge of the pallet, or, something where you don't notice until the whole job's done. So it's like stupid stuff like that as an owner, that you're like, what little tool or what tip can I pick up to eliminate a lot of those little issues? So for us personally, that was the big issue we had. I wouldn't say big issue, but the issue that we had was, we were degreasing properly. We were doing everything we could, but our actual water was the culprit of, leaving, I don't know, whatever minerals on the screen.
Yeah. And that is a problem in certain areas. And like I said, there's different water all over. Certain areas, it's a lot easier to work with the water that's there. But yes, if there's a problem, you can put in, filtration systems like people have in their house, the whole home filtration system that filters out some of those minerals coming into your shop. But if you can suck the water out of the mesh, it alleviates a lot of those problems.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a minute ago about using an air hose to spray to like accelerate your drying process and to speed it up. And this is something that we're super guilty of. And I always wonder, like, are we doing this really, really wrong? Or is this okay? And that is when we coat our screens, we're usually in a hurry and we want them to dry fast. And so we stick a fan on them. And I'm like, oh, duh, there's like blowing dust around the room. I'm sure this probably isn't good. At the same time, I need them to dry fast. And so is there a like happy middle? And by the way, that fan we use in the screen room never leaves the screen room. So it's not allowed. We're not allowed to pull a fan in that we have on press or out there to keep somebody
one that's covered
cool.
in lint.
Yeah, covered in lint. So we have a screen that's dedicated to the screen room. It's always in there and it's pretty lint free, but still we're like blowing around tiny little microparticles. And is that dumb?
Well, I've never seen a clean fan in my entire life because they collect dust and debris constantly, So, it's good to have air movement in the room, but I wouldn't have the fan blowing directly on your screens. If you can have it blowing, just in the room so that there's air movement. It'll still speed up that process. But if you've got it blowing directly on your screens, it's blowing lint and dust all over those freshly coated screens, which is going to go back to pinholes. Maybe not every single time, but it can go back to it. And if you can, once again, reduce those variables that can cause problems, do it. You know, I've seen Dyson has those fans that don't have the blades. Something like that might be
what?
better.
How does that?
Yeah, have you ever seen those? So it's like a Dyson,
like the oval or the circle one.
right? So it's got that fan. It just blows the air out, but it doesn't have the oscillating, you know, the blades of the fan, which is what actually
I don't
collects
believe it.
all that dust.
How does that work?
Witchcraft.
Yeah, it's witchcraft.
It's
You have to buy a pink crystal, a red crystal, and a blue crystal in order for it to work. And you can only do it when the moon is at a specific spot.
Yeah, but I've seen those fans and they don't collect as much dust, so that could be another one of those tips that, you know, that's not going to collect as much dust. They're obviously more expensive than a box fan you can get from Walmart that collects crazy amounts of dust, but
it's the stupid stuff like that you really have to think of. You know, like, so you can go buy a fucking fan from Walmart for like $8-10. And then you can, how much money are you spending on ruining screens or ruining shirts with pinholes and everything else? It's like, spend the extra $50 and buy like a good fan that's not going to do that, or $100, $200 still is cheaper than dicking around with shitty screens or issues on press. It's like, just buy the right tool for the job. Like if that really fixes it, then to me, it's worth spending the money on getting the right tool.
well, what really fixes it is if you go one step further and actually get a drying cabinet that's designed with good airflow and it's heated, not a DIY drying cabinet that typically people will put a little space heater in and those things get up to like 200 degrees. Yeah. So you don't want to be drying your screens above 110 degrees. So if you're putting, you know, a little DIY drying cabinet, you've got a little space heater in there, chances are it's getting above 110 degrees.
Why the 110? Why not above 110?
So above 110, it starts to bake the emulsion and it'll actually start to cross-link some of the polymers, and you'll have issues with exposure if it gets above that. Same with durability too. You'll have issues with durability if you're drying it above 110. So it's just kind of, and 110 is just kind of my rule of thumb. Don't go above that. There's a little bit of fluctuate. You know, you can go above it a little bit and it's not going to be a big issue.
What if your shop is in Palm Springs and it's 115 in your shop?
Then you better put an air conditioner in your screen room.
Yeah.
You know, if you're hot and sticky, your screens are hot and sticky, and they're not going to work as well. That's just
it's like that. It's like that. It's like that meme of the dogs or whatever, and it's like, if you're hot, they're hot. Bring them inside.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we need to do that with screens.
Yeah.
If you're hot and sweaty, if you have swamp ass, they have swamp ass. Bring them inside.
Right.
Speaking of temperature, here's another shop hack, I guess, that most of us know, but maybe some don't. And that is, especially for climates like St. Louis. So right now, we have enough emulsion in our shop to get us through March 1st, which we probably should buy a few more to get us a little further. But you can't ship, or you shouldn't ship emulsion if it's supposed to freeze outside, right? And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically what we'll do is we'll work with our distributors all around the country, and we'll stock up our distributors so they have product closer to everybody, you know? So it's good to have, obviously our shop where we're manufacturing everything is in Duluth, Minnesota. So basically Canada, it's the Great White North. It's actually north of Toronto. So you have to go down to the Southerners in Toronto to visit those guys. But it gets cold up there, and there's a few months and we just can't ship product. If it gets too cold, emulsion will gel, it'll clump, it'll have exposure issues, separation issues. There's just a lot of problems if it freezes and it just won't work properly. So if you have the ability to stock up your shop where you're at and have enough product for those winter months, then you don't have to worry about shipping in those conditions. And flip side, in the summer, when it gets to be 130 degrees on a UPS truck, we have those same kind of issues. If it gets too hot on a UPS truck in transit to you, you can have issues where it just gets too hot. Once again, gelling, exposure issues, just because of those temperature related problems.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, once again, if you can plan ahead and have enough product so that you're good, then you're good. But there's ways that we can ship things and whatnot too. But primarily having product on your floor there is better than having to worry about shipping.
Now, if you had a temperature controlled, if you had an ideal dark room or whatever to have and to store emulsion in, how long can emulsion last? Like, so right now you're saying, oh, winter's too cold and summer's too hot. At what point do you stop buying emulsion to be stocked up?
Yeah, I mean, really, like I mentioned before, the environment of your dark room should be between 60 and 80 degrees is perfect. It's ideal. If you can store it in those conditions, dual cures and diazo emulsions, you're looking at about 12 months shelf life before you sensitize them. Pure photopolymers, you're looking at about 2-year shelf life. So as long as it's stored and kept in those types of conditions, you should be able to get those.
So ideally, you could say that it'd be like maybe 8 months to a year out on stock in your own shop. You could.
I mean, I think that's probably more than you would need. If you can at least get through those winter months, that's the really tough part for shipping for everybody. So if you can stock up in October or November and have enough to get through till March, then you shouldn't have to worry about those shipping issues as much. And like I said, we stock up our distributors around the country too, just like our competitors do, so that you can get product from your local distributor who's, a few miles down the road from you. You should be able to get it to you that day or next day, and you shouldn't have to worry about those freezing issues most times too.
Or if you catch wind of a potential shortage, like the great emulsion shortage of 2021, then you want to make sure you have enough emulsion to get you through a couple of months anyway, until like everything's happening right now, plasticizer, emulsion, everything, like all of a sudden you can't get it, and it's silly, but it's true. I mean, without emulsion, I think we all go home, there's nothing, we can't print. And so it's one of those things that you have to have. We always have, I don't know if we ever have less than 30, 40 gallons in our shop, because just because, like, I don't want to ever get stuck in a spot where we're running out of emulsion, or the emulsion goes bad for some reason, because that happens every once in a while. And which is really cool. It leads me to an experience I had with you, that if you have, if you're chasing, or if you're trying to solve a problem, if something's going wrong, because let's face it, that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
What's really, really cool is that you can replicate the situation at your factory. Because why? Because you keep a gallon from every lot.
Yep.
So you must have like this incredibly large warehouse where you have a gallon from every lot of emulsion you manufacture. You can say, hey, I can actually test the exact emulsion you have there and see what happens here.
Yeah, we keep a quart from every batch that we manufacture. So we've got a room of our retains, and we keep those retains for up to a year. But yeah, we do have an entire room where we just have quarts of emulsions from every batch that we make. Every batch that we make is about 180 gallons. So if you just think of how many gallons that are out there, we've got a quart that correlates back to each one of those batches. So you're right. If you do have an issue, whatever the issue is, we can go back to the lab and say, can you pull that retain? This is the lot number. It matches up with the lot number you have. Coat screens and see, okay, there's no problem here. It must be something that's happening in your facility, process related, or maybe, once again, maybe it got too hot or too cold and shipping to you. That's, those other variables, but at least we can check to make sure something didn't happen in our manufacturing process. There are people that are making that too, and people make mistakes. Obviously, your printers make mistakes, and they're people too. So if something got thrown in by mistake, or the wrong surfactant, the wrong whatever goes into it, now all of a sudden you can go back and test it and say, well, this is coating properly here, but it's not happening where you're at. So let's look at your process and see what could potentially be causing that problem.
Mm-hmm. No, that's cool. You guys have all that. What's going on with emulsion? Is there new science behind emulsion, or has it kind of been stagnant for a while, or is there something in the future that's coming up that is changing?
Yeah, I mean it's been kind of in the same ballpark for a while now. We've changed and had some new products come out recently within the last year or so, with say like LED systems in mind. So we kind of shifted what the emulsions appetite is just a little bit, because the spectral output of the LED system is different than metal halides, it's different than fluorescent tubes, all of those other systems. So it just kind of peaks a little bit higher. And we've shifted the appetite, the spectral appetite of the emulsion a little bit so it matches closer to what LED outputs. So that is probably one of the newer breakthroughs, if you if you want to put it that way. But as far as that goes, there hasn't been any earth-shattering, new developments in emulsion for some time.
How do you guys feel with the newer like laser to screen stuff? Is that affecting? I know you're saying you just now got like dialed in on these emulsions work good for LED. Is that a different spectrum that's going to change?
LED and laser are kind of in that same spectrum. They're very close to each other. So you still would just need a product that's going to work well with whatever system that you're using, and that's really all it comes down to. But most of those systems, you want something that's on the faster exposing side of things, because there happens to be a lot of light scatter with, say, like LED systems. So you kind of want it to be a little bit faster exposing. Now, some of the emulsions with LED are too fast exposing, and you're looking at 2-3 seconds for exposure time. So if you're off by a little bit,
used to be part of our problem.
If you're off by 1 second, you're looking at a 25% difference in your exposure time. So it really becomes a problem at that point. So we've kind of slowed down products and made them, there's just a little bit of shifting for each kind of system.
What would you recommend for a guy in your sciencey perspective is the best emulsion calculator, like your exposure calculator?
So the exposure calculator, actually got one here.
Because I know there's a bunch of different kinds, and then some people make their own where they just do like a sheet of halftones, basically.
Yep. So if you're using film and you're using a vacuum table, you can use the exposure calculator, like the one that I'm here if you're watching it. So this has actually got a filter that's taped to it, and it filters out a given amount of UV for each one of these steps. So this actually will factor in resolution as well as stencil hardness. Whereas if you use just like the step wedge, that's just like the 21 step or the 10 step wedge, you're only getting the emulsion hardness. So you're looking for that solid step 7. That's good for kind of a quality control tool, but it's not good for determining your correct exposure times right up front. If you do an actual step test where you're saying that you print out all those patches right in your screen, and if you're using a direct-to-screen system and you don't have the glass in your exposure unit, you have to go that route. But if you do a step test and actually would you take your screen and cover up, say, I've got a video that completely goes into it on my YouTube channel, but you would basically block off all the other steps, leave one step open, shoot it for a given amount of time, move down your blocking material. Now you have 2 steps open, shoot it for the same amount of time, and keep doing that all the way down, step it off. That's going to be the best way to determine your exposure times, because it's factoring in your film, it's factoring in your ink, it's factoring in everything, but it takes a little bit longer than just something like the exposure calculator like these. So
is that available for that calculator right there? Is that available through Chromaline for anybody who wants it?
Yep, we do have these available. They can reach out to me, and I'd be happy.
You have to buy 50 gallons of emulsion in order to get it.
100 gallons, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
No, we do sell them, but usually I'll have them. If people see me at trade shows or whatnot, I usually have a stack of those things in my backpack. So if you see me, hit me up. I usually hand those things out like.
Or steal his backpack.
Wow.
So
you get more than you bargained for there.
I thought here's something that when I first started anyway, and actually recently have had kind of gave myself a refresher, because there's basically 3 different types of emulsion, And Dylan and I use different types, and that's for different reasons. But why? I don't know. Maybe you could give us just like an abbreviated version of the 3 different types.
Sure.
And then I'd like to talk about what we've chosen to use through Chromaline and why that works, I think anyway, for our shop. But can you break that down for us?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's diazo-based, there's dual cure, and there's photopolymer. And even within photopolymer, there's hybrid photopolymers. So there really is kind of like almost 4 categories nowadays. But so say like straight diazo emulsion, what's in that bucket is unsensitized emulsion. There's no sensitizer in there whatsoever. Once you add the diazo, now it has one curing system. It only has the diazo as far as a curing system. So that's just a straight diazo. And the way a straight diazo emulsion is manufactured, the ratio of the PVA to PVAC and everything that gets put into that, how those ratios are made, it can either be very water resistant or it can be very solvent resistant, but it can't be both. So it's kind of, dependent on if you're using solvent-based inks and you're only using solvent-based inks, or you're using water-based and you're only using water-based, then you can select which one of those products because of how that's mixed. Now, if you get into dual cure, in the bucket itself, when you get it, there is a curing system in that bucket already. You add the diazo, now there's 2 different curing systems, hence dual cure.
That's what we use.
So you can use, with dual cures, they can be resistant to water, solvents, or both, based on how it's designed. Because now there's 2 different curing systems. One can kind of resist one system, and the other can kind of resist the other system. Keep in mind, plastisol will work with any emulsion on Earth because it's not aggressive. So plastisol isn't one of the problems. It's more along the lines of solvent-based inks or water-based inks, or even some of the solvents that are in those water-based inks. I know a lot of people just hear water-based inks and they don't think of the actual solvents that are in with those water-based inks. Sometimes those solvents will attack your screens as well. But so that's the difference between those 2 that you would mix. And then the next step would be the photopolymers, which are just right out of the bucket. You don't have to mix it. You don't have to add sensitizer. It's ready to go right out of the bucket, which, those can be either water resistant, they can be solvent resistant, they can be both, based on how they're kind of designed. So, and especially with the hybrid photopolymer systems that are out there, they can be kind of more water resistant as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So we Zoom called with you, I don't know, a while back when we were trying to, I think, try to find the best emulsion for our situation. And we ended up with Chroma Blue. And that was, like Dylan just said, he really actually couldn't use Chroma Blue, I don't think, because he uses water, it's not water based, and that's going to be an issue. It's not water resistant. And so we don't print with any water-based inks or anything like that. So it works for us. And we chose it because of its, one of the things, because of its speed, it's a little faster. We chose it because it's like excellent detail and resolution. We chose it. Why else? Resistance to humidity, I think, was one of the things. We do have to dial in pretty hard because I don't think it has that much of a latitude. Maybe I'm wrong. Well,
it's because it is on the faster exposing side of things. The faster an emulsion exposes, the more narrow that exposure latitude is. So it's less forgiving because it's faster exposing. Something that's like a dual cure diazo base, because it's slower exposing, it's far more forgiving, and it can fit anywhere within that exposure latitude window. You can be above the correct time or below that time and fall within that window and still be properly exposed. But it is more forgiving. The slower exposing the product, the more forgiving the product is. So with Chroma Blue being fast exposing, you do have to have your exposure times dialed in pretty darn good. The other,
I guess the final reason, or another reason, is why we chose Chroma Blue is it's, and what a lot of people don't think of, which we had to really think about, was its reclaimability. And so for us, it just melts off. And I think, and that's because we have our auto reclaim, and we kind of needed that part of the equation was really important to us. Instead of all the time in the world, we could just let it sit in a dip tank and it's not so important, but we need something that's going to really reclaim.
Right. Yeah, it does reclaim pretty well. But once again, you have to have the right mixture and the right ratios for your reclaim chemistry as well. So I know that when we were testing things at first, we put it through your system and it wasn't reclaiming perfect right off the bat until you did dial in your reclaim chemistry as well.
True.
So there's a little bit from each one of those processes that all have to fit together as far as the full puzzle is concerned. You can't just change one thing and not be concerned about anything else in your shop. If you change one thing, something might need to be altered, one step before or one step after to kind of marry up perfect with that particular product. And
exactly what you're saying. Yeah, because is it true? Like, so for Dylan anyway, because he adds diazo, does that make, because it's resistant to water, so does it make it harder to reclaim? I mean, that's the way I've always thought about it. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yeah. The more resistant. So we have, say, like our CP Tex, which is diazo based. It's a very popular water-based printing emulsion. Being very water resistant, it reclaims harder just because you're using a water process to reclaim your screens. Naturally, it's going to kind of resist that reclaim process just because it is water resistant.
So do people change the chemical then?
You'd either have to just do it for a little bit longer in the dip tank, or you step up the chemical a little bit more intense. But we liked it for two reasons. A, we liked it because we definitely switched back and forth between plastisol and water-based a lot. And the other thing is we were noticing with a lot of like these sim process jobs, we were holding better detail and getting better halftone detail with the diazo in, because it was helping us not lose dots with blowing out the screens. So
and part of that is because of the forgiveness that it's slower exposing. So you don't have to have your exposure times right on target.
Right.
That's why typically you'll be able to hit, smaller resolution dots and fine lines easier with a dual cure, just because it's just more forgiving. So you don't have to be as on target as you do with something that's faster exposing.
Right. I really want to cover with you as much as we can, Kevin,
Sure.
because I feel like this is a huge topic. Like you said, I know we were joking about Facebook, but I feel like every printer and their brother is always like, what emulsion are you using? Or what's the, whatever. I really want to dial in as much as we can on this stuff so that people can, if they listen to this episode, can get educated on emulsion. So I'm going to kind of I somewhat rapid fire a couple questions at you and see.
You need to stretch out, take a deep breath. Here we go.
Well, they're probably just full on questions that we can dive into. They're probably not rapid fire. But one thing you guys were talking about, chroma blue versus, there's tons of different color emulsions. And for us, we always liked a dark color emulsion because it was easier to see the stencil or see issues in the screen, where there, like long time ago, we used to use like Ulano orange, and it was so bright and light that you couldn't see issues in the screen or registration marks as well when you had it on press. So does that play a factor in your guys' decision making on like what color to make the emulsion, or should shops think about that more?
Sure. Really, say like color is personal preference. For the most part, the color is just personal preference. We make our chroma blue emulsion. We make a red version of chroma blue, which is called CTR. So we have a red version and a blue version just because, people get used to working with a blue emulsion. They kind of stick with that because it's what they're used to. And that's it kind of goes across the board with everything that we do. What you're used to, you kind of stick with. Mm-hmm. But I'll have one shop that uses CTR, and right next door I'll have another shop that uses chroma blue, and they'll swear by those products, and they'll say that they hate that other product does not work for them, even though it's the exact same thing, just dyed differently. Mm. So once again, it just kind of goes back to personal preference. How you see through that screen when you're registering your jobs plays into it. But
that was our biggest thing, is that we liked it because if we were using a white mesh or a yellow mesh, it was easier to see the actual image on the screen. Like if you were walking across the room and you saw a screen, if you had a really light colored emulsion, you couldn't necessarily tell what was on that screen until you got up close to it. Right. Or like I said, if you were trying to dial in something, or you're having registration issues, it was really hard contrast wise to see the difference between the emulsion and the screen. So that's why we went with like a really dark, like now we're using a blue. It's like a really deep blue emulsion, where before that we had a dark purple one. So it was just
Doesn't,
really
though,
contrast wise. It showed off what was there and what wasn't there.
Doesn't
Well,
color affect exposure time or can
slightly,
it?
yes. So
Not a big deal though.
typically red emulsions will expose a little slower. You can resolve much cleaner, sharper details, but it's slower exposing. Whereas blue emulsions are typically a little bit faster exposing. It doesn't have as good of resolution as say like a red emulsion, but you're kind of just nitpicking at that point too. Once again, it kind of goes back to your exposure times. But Dylan, like you were saying, once again, you like to use a dark emulsion because of the contrast. There's plenty of people out there that choose a lighter emulsion, say like a Chromaline, that you can put on press and you can see through it so easily to register your jobs because you can see through it a lot easier. That's what they value more, is being able to see through that stencil a lot easier. And it doesn't have that contrast that you're after. We actually have clear emulsions too.
Really?
That people use, and it comes with a dye pack, and you can add however much dye that you want to it, so it's that clear, and you can kind of mess with it so it's the contrast that you desire. But yeah, that contrast and color really is just personal preference for the most part.
Okay, that's a great answer for that question. This is one that I've heard people fight back and forth on, and I went to a seminar once where the dude, I can't remember who was speaking there. I really wish I did. But he was saying that pretty much post-exposure was useless because once you get the cross-linkage of the exposure initially, you're not doing anything differently after the fact. If you're putting it in the sun or you're putting it in the exposure unit again. And then I hear other people are like, fuck that noise. That guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It definitely makes a difference. So I wanted to hear from you, your opinion. Does post-exposure actually do anything? Is it important? What is it?
Sure. Yeah. It's not an opinion. I'll tell you exactly what it is. So let's say like a pure photopolymer, because it's a one-part emulsion, post-exposure will continue to harden that stencil. If you're using something like diazo-based or dual cure, once you've done that initial exposure, whatever is cross-linked has cross-linked, and when you develop it, the diazo that hasn't been cross-linked washes away, so it doesn't continue to harden.
So it depends on what emulsion you're using, if it matters or not. Okay,
yep,
so that's
absolutely
the answer I'm looking for.
Yeah, if you're using the one part pure photopolymers, post-exposure will absolutely continue to harden your stencil, especially if you're doing water-based or discharge jobs. Post-exposure can definitely help make it more water resistant. But if you're just using a straight diazo emulsion, post-exposure doesn't do anything. And I've got customers that swear by post-exposure, and I'll go in there and I'll say, you're using CP Tex, it's a diazo-based emulsion. There's really no need for you to be post-exposing. And they're like, oh, I post-expose my screens all the time, and if I don't, it's not going to work. And it's just, if it makes them feel good,
but that's
by
why
all
I wanted
means,
to
keep doing it.
That's why I wanted to have this conversation, because there's a lot of people that are just doing it because it's what do I want to say? It's like they feel like they have to, when really they're wasting a ton of time, like putting them back in the exposure unit or taking them outside in the sun when it's doing nothing. But it's just because it's hearsay of like, well, I should probably do this. I should probably do this. So that's why I wanted to know, like, it makes total sense now that you say, like, if you're using a dual cure, it doesn't work. If you're using this other one, it's necessary.
I think what's also important to recognize with this, because I thought that was going to be the answer to our situation, because we used to expose LED, was that, okay, cool. Every screen that's coming through here is underexposed. All I got to do is then post-expose with that same LED. And I will never, what I learned is that you can never fully expose with LED because of its limited range, or where it's at, and it's nano, what is it called?
Nanometers.
Meter, yeah, because it's set to 1, and that 1 is a good one, because you're going to get some most cross linking anyway, and a pretty good exposure, but it will never be fully exposed. It's sort of like making or baking a turkey at 150. Yeah, you could leave it in there for 1,000 hours, and it's still never gonna truly bake.
You've heard me use that analogy before, I take it.
I think I might have.
Stole it right from his mouth.
I use that all the time. Yeah, it's very true, because with LED, it's such a sharp spike right at that 405 nanometers that anything outside of that range doesn't get fully hardened. And that's one of the issues with so many of the direct-to-screen systems like, say, like Syntronic or CTS. A lot of those, once again, they're right on that target for that nanometer range, but it doesn't kind of give you that full range. Whereas metal halide really gives you a much wider spectrum of light output, and it exposes different parts of the emulsion with different wavelengths of the light. So you're right. With LED, typically it's a softer exposure, and post-exposure won't fix it. And it won't fix it even if you're using a metal halide and you underexpose your screens and then you post-expose. That initial exposure is far more important than the post-exposure. Yes, post-exposure can be a Band-Aid and can kind of solve some of those problems. It can make it a little bit more durable, more resistant to water or something like that on that end. But that first initial exposure is still very important.
But the thing is like our theory on why we even wanted to post-expose is because I think like most shops, they want to be slightly underexposed so you can get that detail so you're not overexposed and losing detail. And you think to yourself, okay, well, cool. If I underexpose slightly, develop, and then I go post-expose, then I'll harden my emulsion for the longer run, right? And so it won't break down all that shit. Well, actually, that's not, from what you're telling me anyway, you're not really ever achieving that. No, you're not. And it's just that initial exposure is really what makes it resistant and, and kind of mechanically abrade, as the squeegee is hitting it, and that initial exposure is just far more important. You can never fix if it's underexposed. And I can go into almost, I'd say 80% of the shops out there, and I can up your exposure time by 10%, and you're still good, because everybody leans towards that underexposure because they're afraid that they're going to overexpose and things are going to close in. But add 10%, most likely it's just going to make it a more durable screen, and you're going to get the same resolution that you already have.
And what we mean when we say post-exposure is that we're exposing our screens to Post Malone's music.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's all we're doing.
Yeah.
It's just his.
We're on the same page. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Cool. I just want to make sure.
That audio wavelength is what we're looking
the
for.
audio wavelength of his voice fucking really dials in that shit. Yeah.
I was thinking light wavelength. I was way off.
No.
So it's audio.
That's why your screens suck. So let's talk yellow mesh versus white mesh.
Sure.
Ooh.
Dive into that.
One's yellow and one's white.
Great answer. Next question.
All right. Yeah.
So with white mesh, you get light scatter. So as the light, when you're exposing your screen, goes into that white mesh, it actually will follow through the threads and bounce around on the inside of that stencil, kind of almost like a fiber optic cable. The light will go into that thread and run through the thread. So now the screen is exposing from the outside as well as the inside, because that light is bouncing around inside from those threads. With yellow mesh, it actually absorbs that light. So as it hits the yellow mesh, it will absorb into that yellow color. It's the same reason why you use the yellow covers over your bulbs in your screen room, because it absorbs that light and it doesn't bounce around inside there. So if you're doing something that's high detail, and that's the reason why you'll never see white 230 mesh out there, right?
Yeah, anything over 230 for the most part is yellow.
I think usually it's like right around 156 mesh. So sometimes you'll see some 156 yellows and some 156 whites, but that's kind of the cutoff. And anytime you go above that, the reason you're using those higher mesh counts is because you're trying to resolve something fine. And if you use white mesh, you just have too much bouncing around from inside with that light scatter. And
So
is
that why under 156 and like 110 and like a 80 or something like that, you would want that scatter because the emulsion is so thick on that screen?
No, if it were my personal preference, there wouldn't be any white mesh ever. Because even for like a 110 or even below an 86 mesh or something like that, you can still get better resolution and sharper detail with yellow mesh because you don't have that light scatter. the thing is with 110 mesh, chances are you're not doing anything fine detail enough to the point where it really matters.
Right.
Yeah. And what's pretty cool about that too is if you've noticed, or what we certainly did, is that we had some both. We had some white 156 and some yellow 156, and the yellow takes longer to expose for the very reason is there doesn't have that extra light scatter that's bouncing around. And so one of the things we did to try and when we did have LED and we were exposing for like literally 2 seconds, we're like, man, we need to double this. So how are we going to make it longer? I would love to be 4 seconds. You know what I mean? So we have a little more range. Is we made everything yellow mesh because that extended our exposure ever so slightly, just enough, to give us a little more time in that unit.
Well, like I said, these are things that matter. I mean, not a lot of people think about that. Or if you're a younger printer, like why are these yellow and why are these white? And these are things that people just need to know. You know what I mean? So it was kind of
as you talk about mesh too. Another thing people don't really think about is the thread diameter of that mesh.
That's my next question, Kevin. Quiet down, calm it down. You're getting ahead of yourself.
Many shops.
Next question. Difference between hydro and standard.
Okay, so the thread diameter really plays into that as well because the open area of the mesh, obviously light can pass through emulsion much easier by itself than it can pass through the threads. So if you're using thicker thread, now chances are you've got a thicker stencil, and it's just not the exact same. Where you can have somebody that has a 110 80 mesh and a 110 whatever. 156 is probably a better equation with that. But when you use those thin threads, people just have to pay attention to that because you could have some 156 at whatever your thread diameter and 156 at another thread diameter. You should have different exposure times for each one of those stencils because you can't just put it in there and be like, well, this is my 156 mesh. It's going to expose, it's just 156. And most shops, that's all they say. They'll just say, this is my 156 mesh. This is my 230 screens. This is my 110 screens. They don't say it's my 110 80s because they don't think about that other factor that's in there and the different variable. And different manufacturers of mesh. So you'll have, your SADI mesh, your 110 SADI mesh and your 110 CFAR mesh probably isn't using the same thread diameter. So if you have some screens that are stretched with SADI mesh and some that are stretched with CFAR mesh in your shop, then you might have a different exposure time between those screens. You can't just say these are my 110s and these are my 110s because they're not exactly the same.
Right. And the way to fix that is to just make sure the whole industry is ordering screens from Frank. And then we can kind of make sure that we're all on the same page here.
Well, yes and no, because I know Frank uses multiple manufacturers of mesh too. So he might be having one set of screens that's using one manufacturer of mesh and another of another manufacturer. So it's just good to know what that thread diameter is when you're receiving your mesh, regardless of who's making it. But yes, Frank makes great screens.
And the great thing about him is he writes it on there. He writes it on your frame. So he'll say the micron, like right here. Whoops, sorry guys. Conveniently have this. Shout out to Frank. So right here, you've got 158 and then the micron. What does that say? 48 maybe?
48.
Yeah. So he'll tell you, so so you can say, okay, wait, no, I've got this frame right here and it's got 48, which is the same or different than my other one.
And that's why he's the greatest there is. Frank, we love you, buddy. I'll do the golf clap.
Hey, so I know this affects Dylan, doesn't affect me really, but he wants to know, or I guess the question should be is like, can you talk to us a little bit about shrinkage?
Oh, I definitely want to know about that.
Well, it happens when you're in the pool. Ask George Costanza. So shrinkage, it's just what happens when the emulsion dries. So, I mean, if you were to take a profile of your emulsion when it's coated wet, and as it dries, it's actually going to form to those threads. And so you're going to have a little bit of these hills and valleys. Certain emulsions, if you coat it thicker, if it's higher in solids, you're going to have less of that hill and valley. It's going to be kind of like a little wave. Whereas if you're using a lower solids content, that hill and valley might be more, exaggerated. And so if that
like Hidden
up and
Valley
down,
Ranch.
Yep, like ranch,
Okay.
delicious.
Mm-hmm.
That really goes back to your resolution as well. So if your surface, and it's called your RZ. So the RZ is the surface smoothness of your stencil. And the lower that RZ measurement is, closer to 0, the smoother it is. If it's really rough and that shrinkage goes down to those threads, and you have low solid content, and you have really highs and lows, when you go to look at your image, you could still get that stair-stepping pattern because it's just a very rough stencil. You can go back and face coat it after the screen is dried, go back through on your shirt side and do another coat and let it dry. That's going to fill in all those hills and valleys.
Because I've never done that. That seems like such a pain in the ass. Like, do you recommend that?
No,
More of like a high density print or something.
More for high density, more for, say, like industrial applications, people that are printing on glass, or they're doing graphics printing and they're printing on something that's really smooth and it matters. But for shirts, we're printing on fabric, and that's going to get pushed down into that anyway. So that surface roughness doesn't play into as big of a factor as it would if you're printing on a piece of glass.
Okay. I guess the last question isn't really, I guess it's a question for both of you is there anything that any of us can think of before we get out of this episode that we missed about screens or emulsion?
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to touch on too was, right now I've seen kind of a trend, once again, goes back to Facebook and, what to use, what to do. I've seen a trend of people doing like DIY LED exposure units.
Mm-hmm.
For all these people that are just getting into the industry and they don't really know much about making screens, using something that's really fast exposing like LED, where you have to have your exposure times right on, and the variables are very less forgiving than, say, like a metal halide or even fluorescent tubes, because they're much slower exposing. Those people get into it thinking, oh, I can just make this LED exposure unit for, a few $100 and great. I'm making screens, I'm shooting them for 3 seconds. But what they don't realize is that, yes, it'll work. However, it's not as forgiving for somebody that's just getting into this industry. So maybe they should look at something like a metal halide or fluorescent tube systems instead of using those DIY LED exposure systems.
I got a question.
You're one of the main people on this podcast. You don't have to raise your hand, bud.
Well, it just occurred to me. Do you think, because I know we did, do you think that it will trend back to metal halide from LED? I understand the reasons why you want to go to LED. It's faster, it's cheaper, the bulbs last for longer, it doesn't stay hot, all these things. But, there's certain manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, that stopped making, like have phased out even making an MH unit because people don't buy them. And so like, well, people aren't buying them. Why are we going to fucking sell them? And so do you see a trend which of people going LED and saying, wait a second, this works for the most part, or this works in my shop, but in this shop, it doesn't work. And it like ours, it just worked horribly. Do you see people going back, and do you see it trending back towards metal halide?
I sure hope so. There's obviously pros and cons for everything. And you mentioned, with LED, there definitely are pros. It runs a lot cooler. There's less energy consumption. The bulbs last much longer. And we even have our own LED exposure system that we sell. However, it will never be as good from a quality standpoint as a single point metal halide system, just because that single point metal halide, one, it's coming from one source, and it's not coming from all the diodes from, say, like the LED systems or the vast majority of the LED systems that are out there. But two, it covers a wider range of that light spectrum, so you get a much more durable screen and much better resolution. So I really hope there's a trend back towards metal halide, but I'm not sure what the trends will be. I think as far as a quality standpoint, you're never going to beat metal halide from a quality standpoint.
What about the laser system?
I mean, jury's still out on the laser system.
Okay. Because I'm honestly really looking into it for this year, like this upcoming year.
Mhm.
I want one because I'm seeing the results of like the actual dots it's producing, which really excites me. But the other part of it is how much less room it's taking up in the darkroom.
Yeah.
Like, because it's like a stand-up unit against the wall, I can get rid of the eye image and the exposure unit, and it's going to save me a ton of room in that area. So that's really important to me.
Yeah, I haven't played with the laser systems as much yet, but once again, the laser system is still on that very sharp peak, and it's not very forgiving. So the product that you use and the process, everything needs to be very dialed in for that to work properly, in my opinion. As far as if you're coating your screens, you better be using an autocoder if you're using that system, in my opinion, because any fluctuation, that's going to change the exposure time with that laser system, and it's just not very forgiving.
Right.
So I think that the jury is not out for me, and I'll go on record to say that the laser is not for our shop. There's no way I would ever buy it. I don't think that
no way I would ever buy it.
No way, because I don't think they can ever do anything to improve it for the very reason of what he just said. It's just like LED. It picks its nanometer and it stays there, and it doesn't have the wide spectrum. And I also think that there's some scattering going on. And I know, here's the thing, like, yeah, it makes screens. Yes, it does. And I think it works for some shops because, just like you said, you have to weigh the pros and cons. Like let's say you have a shop that doesn't make screens with detail in it, that you don't care about scatter, or maybe you have a dip tank and you don't care about its reclaimability and the fact that you're always going to be underexposed and what that does to auto reclaim. And so for us, we've been down the road and we don't want to go down that road again. I learned a hard lesson. Maybe it wasn't hard, maybe just an important lesson. And I can buy a kick-ass metal halide unit for $10K, and then I can CTS all day long with my wax. And so why would I ever want to spend that much money for laser? Also, it costs more, And so yeah, the jury is not out for me. I know, Kevin, maybe you've got your opinions, but I definitely know for our shop, just like you said, every shop's different. I'll never buy a laser. Period.
Well, one other thing too with the laser systems, I know that they say that there's no consumables, but I think you almost have to consider the laser itself a consumable.
Yeah.
Because that laser, and there's not a lot of people that really think about that though. You're only going to get a given amount of hours with that laser, and then you got to swap out that laser. And it's not like putting a block of wax into your, as far as consumable goes, it's expensive for a new laser. So that's just something that needs to be factored into it when you're starting to budget for that type of system.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
But I know people that use them and love them too. So, I mean, once again, it goes back to your shop, what you're using, the artwork that you're doing, everything that has to factor into it. Everything isn't, once again, if we can make one emulsion that did everything, we would make one emulsion that did everything. But we can't. So we have to have something that fits into each one of these types of systems. And, the laser might be good for somebody and it might be bad for somebody. It sounds like, we got the best of both worlds here.
Well, I more want to get it just because it bugs Andy. So if I can get something to piss him off, then I ideally that's where I'm steering.
It would just make me laugh, so it wouldn't piss me off. It would humor me.
He's
so
saying
please,
that now, but really he's crying on the inside. So
you need to get your laser and your DTG, and then I'll have lots to roast you about. I like it.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean that's how I usually do all my business decisions too, is by just pissing off people.
Right. I mean, it makes total sense.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Well, Kevin, is there anything else that you can think of that we might have missed, or that you want to talk about?
I think we've covered quite a few topics.
Okay. Well, I guess the next thing I would say is, can you tell us any more about Chromaline in general? I mean, we've talked about you, but do you want to highlight anything that Chromaline has that we don't know about? Yeah,
I mean, so Chromaline, I can kind of give you the history of Chromaline. About 80 years ago, it was a company called Chroma Glow, and it was actually a printer. They found out that they could start making their own emulsion. They started working with stuff, and they started making their own emulsion for their shop. And printers in the area got wind of it and started buying emulsion from them just in the area in Duluth. So you just had a pocket of printers that were buying emulsion from this one screen printer that was making their own emulsion. Now, this isn't a good idea for anybody listening to this that thinks, oh, I can make my own emulsion. That's probably a horrible decision, because we've gone through all the bumps and bruises over the years to get to the formulas that we're at now. But then they started getting really good at it. They started getting more interest, and they sold off their printing portion of the business to a company down in Minneapolis and only started making emulsions and capillary films and all that good stuff. So they've been making emulsion for almost 75 years now. So we've been doing it for quite some time up in Duluth. We do have some other divisions. We've got our sandblasting division. So we make a film that's kind of like a capillary film that would go on, say, like glass or ceramics or, virtually anything. And you can sandblast, etch products that way with that type of system. Once again, it's coated the same way as our capillary film is. So we do have some other things going on at our facility as well.
That's awesome.
Are you going to be at Long Beach this year, or
I am.
next year?
Yeah, I'll be at Long Beach as long as it takes place.
Right.
I'm actually going to be doing a seminar there. Emulsion, what's the difference? So kind of this, but kind of going into, maybe more detail on certain things and whatnot as well. So I'll be doing a seminar out there. So as long as it takes place, I'll be there. Hopefully it takes place.
We all need to nip in the butt that it's not going to take place. Let's stop putting that bad juju in the air. Okay. The only way it's not going to take place is if everybody keeps questioning if it's going to take place or not.
I'm only questioning because other people question it. I'm going regardless.
Don't.
Yeah, we're all going anyway. And if it's canceled, then we'll just have our own convention, right?
I live in Minneapolis. I want to go to Long Beach in January. Believe me.
Well, it's funny. I was at M&R the other day, and I was talking to Danny, and he asked me how I felt about Long Beach. Remember, I was like, I used to fucking lick toilet seats and drink from a hose as a kid. I was like, if anything, it's gonna make me stronger to hang out with people, dirty ass people in Long Beach. So I'm game. I'm going for the hangs with friends, and if I get to see some screen printing shit too, rad. But for the most part, I just want all of my friends to be in one place where we can just hang out for 4 or 5 days. So,
yeah, absolutely. It's good for the mental health.
Yeah.
I've the last update that I got just last week, they're going forward. So everything's on track to go forward. I don't think there's going to be a problem with it.
All right, cool.
All right, let's do some quick takes. Yeah, Dylan?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have the first one. And so, Kevin, tell us, what is one thing you need every day?
One thing that I need every day.
He takes a shot of Chroma Blue.
It doesn't taste as good as you'd think.
Okay.
I need my coffee every day.
What kind of coffee?
I usually do bulletproof coffee.
Like black? Or do you put a ton of stuff in it?
No, I don't put a ton of stuff in it. Yeah, pretty much black.
Okay.
Is Bulletproof just a brand or a store there?
No, bulletproof, you're actually putting in coconut oil into it. And because of the oils, how it bonds with the coffee, it really gives you that jolt a little bit longer. Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Oh, it's Kevin. It's the emulsion guru.
All right. That makes sense.
Well, and as I'll touch on that too. You called me the emulsion guru. That started out as a joke because I didn't have an Instagram and all that stuff. And one of my customers said, you should just call yourself the emulsion guru or something like that. And I'm like, all right, whatever. And I just did it thinking nobody would ever follow me or even take a look
well, it
at
ain't no joke.
That kind of stuff.
It ain't no joke.
It's gone pretty well over the last few years.
That's awesome, dude. Well, the truth of it is the nerdy people that care and want to dive deep into this kind of stuff in their shop, like someone like you is invaluable. You know what I mean? Like that's the shit that we don't have time to get super, super sciencey on and be like, oh, what do we got to do here? So someone like you is I'm glad you did what you did.
So I'm going to make this up. How much do you think it would be worth? Let's say your screen room is a mess or something's not working in your screen room. How much do you think it would be worth for Kevin or somebody like him to come in your screen room and just fucking make it bomb? Like what's a dollar amount? What would that be worth to you?
I mean, I would definitely pay a pretty penny to have someone come in and just fucking do it for me and be like,
Hell yeah.
here's your formula. Do this from here on out.
Because of what we just talked about, all the things that it saves you down the line.
I know. I would
it's
definitely.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like how valuable it really
and
is.
as I told you before we got on here, is I contacted Kevin and said, hey, I would love you to come out here and help me. And he said, hey, how about you suck a big fat one? I'm not coming out there.
Well, not so much, not in those words, but
that's exactly what you said, but it was way more vulgar. And I don't want to say those words on the air and hurt our listeners' feelings.
Yeah. These listeners, I'm sure, are going to hurt a lot of their feelings.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, you're outside of my territory. So, I mean, there's lines and I can't cross them. I'll get shot if I go over the fence.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
Well, just call me Dylan because I have the answers now.
Yeah. I'll pass.
But I'm happy to talk through anything that you have, and I can put you in touch with the right people.
But yeah, I really do. Like, for real though, I would love to have someone come in and just like dial all my shit in. But I don't know if that's a thing. Like, is that a thing that like Chromaline could do?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I do a lot of the time that I'm out there.
That's what he did here.
We'll go and visit shops, and I bring my tools. I've got my, my.
Well, I've had people come here before and just like test my EOM, but that was about it. They were just like, well, I guess figure it out. And I'm like, all right, cool. Well, okay. Did nothing.
So hang on. I know we're in quick takes, but this is one thing I think we left out is that you travel with this briefcase of tools. Can you tell us just a couple or the top 3 tools you think a screen room should have?
So, that was something we never talked about. We never talked about a fucking Newton meter.
True.
So thickness gauge.
Okay.
Yeah, Newton meter for your stretching your screens.
Okay. That's 1. That's 2.
A loop.
Oh, a loop.
Mm-hmm.
A lupe.
A lupe. Exposure calculator.
That's 4. Okay, one more. I'll make top 5.
And honestly, something like this is a humidity gauge, a moisture meter. Mm. So you can put this on your screen, and it'll tell you if your screens are still wet. So a lot of times your screens will skim over and dry, and you'll think that they're dry, but they might not be dry in the middle. So it's kind of like a tomato. You can grab the outside of it, feels dry, but if you put the finger in the middle, the tomato's wet.
That's what.
Do you have a recommendation on? Do you have a recommendation on the ones to get? Because right there you mentioned probably like $1,000 worth of tools, but more.
Yeah, I mean,
way more than 1,000 for those tools.
Yeah, more than 1,000. The moisture meter. This one's by CFAR. They don't make this anymore, so. This is probably more than 1,000 because I could sell it on eBay for probably 1,000 by itself. But anything that's non-destructive. So the moisture meters that are out there, most of them have the 2 prongs and they're sharp prongs, and they're used to test like the moisture in wood.
Right.
Okay.
So either you can get those and you can take a file and file off those points so they're not destructive and they're just rounded and touch your screen that way. That's probably the easiest way. You can just go to Home Depot and get one and file those down. But for like the non-destructive type like this, there's not too many of them that are out there like that.
He's just trying to make himself irreplaceable.
Yeah, well,
he's like, I'm the only one who has these tools.
That's it. Yeah. Well, I'm the only one who knows how to use them. Yeah. No, the thickness gauge, I use a Fisher isoscope.
I use that one when I'm dating.
The Fisher isoscope is by far the most accurate thickness gauge that's out there.
So stupid.
But there are cheaper ones that are out there, but they're not as accurate.
I have Frank's.
Fisher.
Once again, Frank is the best, and he exactly. And I have his gauge, and
Never
I have to actually sometimes ship it back to him because he has to give it to somebody else, but he lets it live here because I like to know the thickness of things. Shut up, Dylan. Next question.
I can't help it. Okay. It's a fucking disease. You get 2 tickets to a show. Who do you go see?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Probably Foo Fighters. I've seen them a bunch of times already. I've seen them at like Wrigley. I've seen them at Red Rocks. I've seen them in a lot of cool places already.
That's
but
awesome.
they put on an awesome show every time, and I would easily go back and see them over and over.
We just read Dave Grohl's book. Have you done that yet?
I'm about halfway through it. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
You listen? You have it on Audible, or are you reading?
No, with paper, old fashioned.
Yeah.
Okay. Andy, next one.
Oh yeah, it's me. What gets you really pumped besides science?
Gets me pumped. As you mentioned earlier on, I am a Packer fan, pretty diehard Packer fan. So sports, I know a lot of people either love it or hate it, and I love sports, and they really get me going.
Well, you have a very controversial QB over there, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, you mean Dr. Rogers? Yes. Dr. Rogers, yes, he's controversial, but I think he's a smart dude. I think he doesn't get the credit that he deserves.
That's fair.
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Sports.
What pisses you off?
People going on Facebook and saying, what's the best emulsion that's out there? That and,
That's fair.
what I'm using Chroma Blue. What's my exposure time?
Right.
I can't give you a time. You have to do the exposure testing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Andy, you get the next question.
Best thing about Minnesota.
Ooh. So Minnesota is known for inventing a burger with cheese on the inside.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And not only that, but there is a massive war over which bar invented the Juicy Lucy. So I live in a place and it's known for cheese. You bite it, cheese oozes out. Molten lava cheese. If you don't let it,
there's no cheese on top at all. Like you order the burger, you say, "Hey, I want a cheeseburger or
who
whatever."
does that? Everybody does that. Come on, put it on the inside so it's molten lava and just burns the shit out of your face when you take a bite out of it right when you get it. But
Don't you want to fly to Minnesota tomorrow? I think that might be necessary.
Any way I can get my hands on a Juicy Lucy, I'm there.
Yeah, they're awesome. Come visit.
You want a
anytime.
Juicy Lucy, not a Lucy Juicy.
Right. And there's other places trying to get crazy, doing like a Bluesy Lucy with blue cheese on the inside and getting all wild.
That's an
I'm
infection.
okay.
Yep.
I don't know. Okay, so where is the best place to get the Juicy Lucy?
Ooh, this is very controversial, but I would definitely say Matt's Bar.
All right, my next question is on here, but Andy, I'm changing it because I like an older question that you don't have on here.
Sure.
What are you currently watching? What shows are you into right now?
I'd say there's a couple that I'm a big fan of. Yellowstone is a pretty good one right now that I'm a big fan of.
How far in are you?
I'm up to date.
Up to date, okay.
Yep. And then the new rebooted version of Dexter, the new season of Dexter is.
I don't even think I'm going to give it a chance.
Oh, it's so good.
It's comparable to old Dexter?
Absolutely.
Really?
It's good.
All right. Fuck all. I guess I got to try it.
Can you watch the rebooted version without ever watching the?
No. It's essentially just like the new season of Dexter, and kind of makes up for some of the problems that they had in their final.
Have you seen the Instagram reels where it'll show the person the first season they watch Yellowstone and then it goes to the second season?
Yeah, and he's got the
third.
full jacket and hat on in the end. He comes in all grumpy. I sent that to somebody the other day. Yeah.
It's pretty good.
I've watched all of Yellowstone except the new season. I don't have Paramount Network, and I got my hands on the first episode and I watched that. And then I hate watching things week to week now because I'm so like spoiled with just being able to pound through a season.
Yeah.
So I kind of just want to wait for it to get over. But I know it's so popular that like I'm seeing spoilers all over the place. So I kind of just want to ignore the internet on it and then watch them all when they all come out at once.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, Beth becomes nice.
Don't fucking ruin it.
I'm just kidding. Beth will never become nice.
All right, good.
All right. So next we've got big party or small gathering.
No, that was the one I skipped. That
Well,
was my question.
Well,
Yeah.
shouldn't have skipped.
It depends who I'm with. I mostly small gathering. For the most part, I'm not a big fan of people in general. So if I can have a small gathering, it's much better.
Like that answer.
Truth. Well, Andy, you have the next question then.
I get 2 in a row here. Yes. So
I see what you did, you dick.
sunrise or a beautiful sunset.
Ooh, I'm going sunset. Usually, I'm not up for the sunrise.
I'm with you.
I'm not a morning person at all.
Actually, these days I've got both because I think our days are like a half hour long.
Yeah, pretty
Right.
much.
I do love a good sunset. Nathan, back,
I do like sunsets when they're later than 4:30 in the afternoon, but yeah, sunset's much better.
I like
I
getting
know.
to the shop when it's dark and leaving when it's dark.
Yeah, that's always the best.
and the shortest day of the year, I want to say, is like in a week. So we're there. We're right there. But get better one day.
Favorite snack?
Favorite snack? I gotta go beef jerky.
All right.
I,
Now, this is important to me because I love beef jerky as well. Are you a like dry beef jerky guy or like a moist beef jerky guy?
I'm like in between. So like,
No, it's a fucking cop out. Pick
no,
one.
it's not because I hate like the really moist jerky and I really hate the really dry jerky. It's got to be, like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's got to be somewhere in between. And to be fair, I know some of the Jack Link's people from college, so I know some of the Link's family. So that's kind of the direction that I go.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. See, I'm more of like a Wild Bill's guy where it's just like super dry, petrified jerky. And the really moist stuff, like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like jerky to me. It just feels like I'm eating like just a meat snack. Like it's
Yeah,
just
and
like,
it feels like too processed. I'm not a fan.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird.
Yeah. I'd rather lean towards dry. I'm with you there.
Okay. All right, cool. Andy, finish her off.
Yeah, I don't know if I should ask what's for dinner or what's for lunch. I mean, it's lunchtime for me.
I don't know.
Either one. You go with either one. You pick.
I'm not sure what I'm making tonight. I am the cook in the house. I've cooked in restaurants and stuff like that before I got into screen printing, so I do love cooking. I just haven't chose what I'm making yet tonight. I know.
Do you have like a Sunday staple?
No.
Hmm.
I just change it up. Whatever I look and see what I'm going to make is just like looking at a menu. You go to a restaurant. I don't plan ahead. I know my wife likes to plan ahead. She looks at the menu before we go to the restaurant and knows exactly what she's going to get when we get there. And I have no clue what I'm going to get until the server gets to my table. And that's kind of the way I am when I start cooking dinner too.
Fair enough. You're leaving it open for questions.
Interpretation.
Right.
What are you having, Dilly? You have any idea?
Unfortunately, there's a family gathering at my house at 5:00, and some fucking asshole decided to make the dinner tonight soup. So,
Okay. Well, what kind of soup? That could be good.
I think everyone's bringing different soups, so it's like a soup buffet. So it's more shit ideas all together. It's at my house, so I said, well, I'm definitely making. If we're having soup, I'm making grilled cheese so that I can at least have a meal with my meal.
That's a good move.
Grilled cheese soup? I'm impressed.
No, I want something to actually eat, because to me, soup is just like chunky shit floating in water. So I want to have a grilled cheese so I can dip it and have like a juicy sandwich.
So do you like the chunkier soups or the
I'm more of a
less chunky
stew. I'm more of a
soups?
stew guy. Like if it's like gravy with chunks in it, that's different.
Okay.
But like soup, I just don't like soup.
He likes a high solids content to his
Yeah,
soup.
high solids.
Yeah. So
All right.
not a lot
I
of
can
water.
get down on that.
See, like if you had like chicken noodle soup and you had grilled cheese, then you could soak up all of the broth in the sandwich, and then all you're left with is noodles and chicken at the end, and then you can eat that. But to just have like shit floating in liquid and be like, yeah, I just don't get it. I don't like it.
I think we're going with.
Oh,
I sort of feel like chili. It's been a while, and it'll give
You
me a
always
few
go with
days.
chili.
Well, I fucking like it. Okay, and so I know that if I make it today, I could have it. Oh shit! Actually, we have a party. I just forgot. Oh yeah, so I can't have chili tonight. We're going to the neighborhood party. The neighborhood's having a holiday party. So never mind.
Well,
I
hopefully
don't know
it's
whatever
chili.
they're having. I don't know.
Hopefully it's soup.
Yeah,
Soup buffet.
Well, Kevin, dude, you are a world of knowledge. You helped us tremendously at our shop. I think you've helped a lot of people today. I hope so. Anyway,
Hope so.
you are
think
certainly you live up to your name as a guru, and I don't know. I think I love you.
Oh,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm starting to love you as well. So we'll just have to see where this goes. But if
Well, he
people
already
have
put up walls for me, so I guess I'm never getting that love. But that's cool.
if people have questions, I know that we talked about a lot of shit on here today. If people have questions, they can reach out to me on the socials. They can email me. They can do any of that good stuff. I'm happy to answer questions, and
They should most certainly go to ISS and take your seminar.
I would agree with that. Yep. It'll be fun. We dive into a lot of things, and yeah, it should be a good seminar.
You know your time slot yet? Which day it is?
Thursday, I want to say it's Thursday late morning,
Okay.
I think.
Sounds good.
It's changed a few times already. I mean, so I'm not exactly sure what it is at the point.
I'll definitely
Right now?
find you when we're out there.
Okay,
Does
perfect.
Chromaline have a booth?
Yes, we will have a booth.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, we will see you there then.
Sounds good.
All right, dude. Have a good Sunday, and we'll catch you later.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Later, man.